Chapter 2407. The sparse golden flames once again lit up the entire night sky. Valkyries appeared one after another. The number of Valkyries in the sky had increased to a hopeless number. This was the cautious choice the Valkyrie leader had to make. She didn't know what other trump cards the man before her had. So, she had to defeat and kill this enemy in the most cautious way. That was to mobilize the entire Valkyrie army, 10,000 Valkyries. The Valkyries were the strongest army under Odin. Their number would always remain at 10,000. When they suffered losses on the battlefield, they would select strong and brave women from among the human women, bestowing them with great power and bestowing them with a sacred mission. Both Dao Er and Dao San felt that this was a hopeless battle. Perhaps Qin Zhao still had a trump card. If he was facing the previous 1,000 Valkyries, he might have a chance of winning. But now, the number of Valkyries had increased by 10 times. This was a hopeless situation. Chen Zhao raised his head and looked at the Valkyrie leader. "Sisters, victory belongs to us. Show this fallen one our power." This time, the Valkyries didn't attack Chen Zhao with golden flames. They charged at Chen Zhao one after the other. They stabbed at Chen Zhao with their red spears. Chen Zhao sneered. His figure suddenly flashed. Cloning. 32 clones appeared before the Valkyries. Seeing Chen Zhao's cloning, Dao Er and Dao San couldn't help but be shocked. This was a real cloning technique. No, it was even more advanced than the cloning techniques they knew in the past. With their eyesight, they could obviously tell that the 32 clones were all unbelievably powerful. In an instant, countless Valkyries and Chen Zhao's 32 clones were engaged in battle. It was a bloody battle, blood and flesh interweaved to create an extremely cruel scene. But it was also a merciless massacre. No matter how many ants there were, they were still ants. The Valkyrie leader frowned. She saw Chen Zhao and his clones brutally killing her sisters. She couldn't bear it, but she couldn't show it. Power stop! Just then, Chen Zhao's real body suddenly felt weak. His power had completely turned into that of a normal person. This feeling of weakness made Chen Zhao very uncomfortable. Fortunately, the Valkyrie's spirit of speech only worked on Chen Zhao's real body. It was ineffective against Chen Zhao's avatar, because those clones weren't real clones. Instead, they were part of Chen Zhao's consciousness. They could also be seen as individuals. At the same time, hundreds of Valkyries fell from the sky. Chen Zhao's heart skipped a beat. He hadn't attacked them, so how did they fall? I understand now. Dao Er could not help but yell when he saw this. Dao San's reaction was a little slow. He immediately shouted, "I understand too." "Your Excellency, although the Valkyrie's words conceal your abilities, they have to bear the same amount of pressure. The more abilities and powers you have sealed, the more pressure they have to bear," Dao Ji reminded him. Chen Zhao's eyes lit up. "I see." Chen Zhao couldn't help but smile. Giant spirit divinization. Chen Zhao was immediately covered in a layer of golden light. Instantly, Chen Zhao's power increased again. The original feeling of weakness was gone. Power seal. Seeing this, the Valkyrie leader had to use the same trick. However, in the giant spirit divinization, Chen Zhao's power was more than 10 times stronger than before. Instantly, countless Valkyries fell from the sky. The golden flames on their bodies also became extremely weak. "Disintegrate the clones," the Valkyrie leader ordered again. However, this time, it didn't work on Chen Zhao or the other avatars. How? Why is it ineffective? Are those not clones? The Valkyrie leader's expression was very ugly. Chen Zhao suddenly turned into a body of energy and shot into the sky. All the Valkyries along the way were instantly pierced through by Chen Zhao. Chen Zhao's real body was unstoppable. Meanwhile, Chen Zhao's avatar didn't stop killing. Everyone was stunned by this scene. Valkyries kept falling from the sky. At the same time, there was a rain of blood. Sisters, come back! Just then, all the Valkyries in the sky disappeared. Only the Valkyrie leader was left. The Valkyrie leader glared at Chen Zhao with hatred. Human, you're very strong, but you haven't won yet. Really? Chen Zhao shrugged. He didn't need to explain too much. Facts spoke louder than words. Weren't the corpses all over the ground enough to prove the truth? The Valkyrie leader looked at her sisters who had been brutally murdered. Sorrow welled up in her heart. Sisters, come back. Just then, the corpses started turning into specks of starlight. Even the blood they'd spilled on the ground started turning into starlight. The scene was like a river of stars. It was very relaxing. Is it the last attack? Chen Zhao looked at the Valkyrie leader warily. But just then, the Valkyrie leader turned into a beam of light and shot into the night sky. Chen Zhao looked at the beam of light that disappeared into the night sky. He was still on guard. Was it a powerful move that descended from the sky? But after waiting for a long time, the Valkyrie still didn't use her full power. Chen Zhao was a bit shocked. It couldn't have run away, right? The Valkyrie, who'd been so fearless just a moment ago, couldn't have run away so suddenly, right? After waiting for another minute, Chen Zhao was finally sure. Fuck, she really ran away. Chen Zhao let out a long breath. He withdrew his avatar and walked toward the crowd. Everyone was on guard against Chen Zhao's approach. They knew that being on guard was useless against Chen Zhao, but their instinctive fear couldn't be avoided. Who's Ronson? Sir. What's wrong? Ronson was scared. He believed that he definitely didn't know the man before him. He also didn't understand why this strange and terrifying man would mention his name. Had he or one of his relatives been caught by him before? Ronson had encountered this in the past too. After catching a suspect, the suspect's family and friends would come to him for revenge. Just as Ronson's thoughts were running wild, Chen Zhao said, "Your deputy chief asked me to come and save you." Deputy chief? You mean David? Ronson's jaw dropped. His face was filled with disbelief. The newly transferred deputy chief could actually find such a terrifying guy? Did the deputy chief have some powerful background? It really seemed possible. After all, David was only in his early 30s, but he was already the deputy chief of LAPD. It was extremely rare to see a deputy chief at this age in America. Chapter 2408. Just then, Chen Zhao's phone rang. Chen Zhao picked it up. It was Yanghua. Chen Zhao, where are you? I've walked 100 kilometers out to sea and didn't see you. Did I go in the wrong direction? Or did something happen? Previously, Chen Zhao and Yanghua had traveled together to search for Dao Er, Dao San, and the others. However, Yanghua couldn't keep up with Chen Zhao's speed. Through Amon and Little Nine, Chen Zhao had sensed the danger from Dao Er and Dao San. That was why Chen Zhao left first, while Yanghua found a small boat. However, when Yanghua arrived at the original battlefield, he realized that the nearby sea was calm. It was as if nothing had happened. Chen Zhao and the others were nowhere to be seen. Yanghua had no choice but to call Chen Zhao after searching for nothing. We're in the desert now. We don't know our exact location yet. Chen Zhao was helpless too. He didn't know where Ms. Wu had taken them either. However, this shouldn't be a California desert. Judging from the grains of sand on the ground, it should be an even older desert. There were so many deserts in the world. Actually, the sand in each desert was different. Depending on the age of desertification, the amount of rainfall, and the geological structure, the degree of desertification would be different. Chen Zhao wasn't an expert in this area, but he knew the basics. Where are my two seniors? How are they now? Chen Zhao glanced at Dao Er and Dao San. They seemed to be injured. It looks pretty serious. Hearing this, Yanghua panicked. Are their lives in danger? I don't think so, Chen Zhao said. Yanghua finally heaved a sigh of relief. What about Scott Lee? How is he? Who's Scott Lee? I sent him to translate for my two seniors, Yanghua said. Oh, is he from your psionic team? Chen Zhao narrowed his eyes. He scanned the crowd and finally locked onto Scott Lee. Ronson had already confirmed his identity. Katie didn't look like a translator. When Chen Zhao first saw Scott Lee, he thought that he was also from China. He thought that Dao Er and Dao Sun had brought him out and was a disciple of Dragon Tiger Mountain's celestial sect. Hearing Yang's words, Chen Zhao realized that he was from the psionic team. That Scott Lee is dead, Chen Zhao said. Hearing that, Yang felt like he was struck by lightning. He was speechless. He's dead. That's right. He died a horrible death. He was directly vaporized. Not even his bones were left. Dao Er, Dao San, and the others were not far from him. Hearing Chen Zhao's conversation, Scott Lee mumbled something about not even leaving a corpse behind. It wasn't anything, but when Chen Zhao said that, he was clearly looking at him. This scared Lee very much. At this moment, he was racking his brains. How had he offended Chen Zhao? But after thinking for a long time, he couldn't remember knowing Chen Zhao. After hanging up, Chen Zhao approached Scott Lee. You're Scott Lee, right? Yes. I am, sir. What's the matter? You're from the psionic team? I am. I'm the president of the supernatural organization. Scott Lee's expression instantly became very interesting, although he had only joined the psionic team for a short period of time. This didn't stop him from knowing that the psionic team's nemesis was the supernatural organization. Usually, all he heard was how the psionic team would surpass the supernatural organization. Originally, Scott Lee had thought that the psionic team was so strong, it would only take a few minutes for them to surpass the supernatural organization. But after hearing Chen Zhao's self-introduction, Scott Lee couldn't help but feel fear. Was the psionic team going to become enemies with such a terrifying existence? Wasn't that too reckless? The so-called experts in the psionic team would probably be slapped to death by Chen Zhao. Thinking of this, Scott Lee couldn't help but shiver. Slap. Chen Zhao slapped Scott Lee's head. I'm talking to you. How dare you daydream? I'm sorry. Scott Lee immediately lowered his head and apologized. He couldn't offend him. Where do you live? I'll send you home. Chen Zhao grinned at Scott Lee. Scott Lee could tell that Chen Zhao was threatening him. If you don't want to go home, then you can stay with the supernatural organization for a while. How about that? Scott Lee lowered his head and thought for a while. Finally, he nodded. Scott Lee knew that Chen Zhao was subtly detaining him. Then Chen Zhao looked at Dao 2 and Dao 3. You're old Zhang's disciples? Old Zhang. Zhang Tianyi, Chen Zhao said. We're the Celestial Master's disciples. We're Yang's seniors. Chen Zhao looked at their ages. At their age, people might even believe that they were Yang's grandfathers. But considering Zhang Tianyi's age, it was reasonable for his disciples to have such a large age gap. Chen Zhao called Zhang Tianyi again. Hey, old Zhang, did you miss me? An angry voice came from the other end. You dog, you had to call me now. You caused me to be killed alone. Chen Zhao didn't put it on speakerphone, but Zhang Tianyi's voice was too ear-piercing. Dao 2 and Dao 3 had to listen, even if they wanted to. They'd never heard Zhang Tianyi speak in such a tone. In the past, they'd always been steady and gentle. In the end, the first thing Chen Zhao said was vulgarities. Their jaws dropped. I did another good thing today. Good thing? You? Yeah, I've been accumulating merit recently. If you kill less, that'll be the greatest merit. Do you know what it means to kill for a noble cause? I kill to save people. Fuck, that's fucking killing for a noble cause. It means sacrificing oneself to achieve great things. What fucking killing to save people? If there's nothing else, don't disturb my advancement match. Not only did I kill people today, but I also saved a few people. None of my business. 2 old men were among the people I saved, but they should be dying soon. I see that they're in so much pain that I can't bear to see them continue to be tortured, so I plan to send them on their way. Give me a plan. Dao 2 and Dao 3 were dumbfounded. What did he mean by dying soon? We didn't, the two wanted to explain, but the next moment their mouths were covered by dark lava. Dao 2, Dao 3? Zhang Tianyi heard a voice beside him. What happened to them? Something like that. They encountered demons and were seriously injured. They can't be saved. Chapter 2409. Can I say one last thing to them? No, they can't speak, see, or hear now, Qin Zhao said. But I have a life-saving medicine. It's very effective and can bring them back to life in a matter of minutes. It's just that the formula is a bit expensive. Then help me find a good place to bury them, Zhang Tianyi said angrily. He knew that Chen Zhao was trying to extort him again. Sure. Chen Zhao didn't give Zhang Tianyi a way out. I think the place where they're buried is good. With the protection of their ancestors, their descendants will definitely become rich in the future. Oh, the refreshing cleansing pill I promised you last time is already on the way. But I forgot whether to send it to Shintong or Yuantong. Why don't you pay attention? Chen Zhao pursed his lips. Oh, your grand disciple, surnamed Yang, seems to be heading this way. I think that with his close relationship with his senior brother, he'll definitely be devastated if he finds out that the two of them died in a foreign land. He might even be in so much pain that he wants to die and want to commit suicide. You win. I have some purple heart bamboo seeds. I'll use them to exchange for my grand disciple's life. How about that? What are you saying? Your grand disciple is my grand disciple. Would I purposely harm their lives? Yes, I was wrong. Please save my grand disciple, okay? But what's that purple heart bamboo? It's not anything good. When it grows up, the bamboo joints will automatically brew bamboo heart dew. It can make people not age, and there won't be any side effects. Qin Zhao's eyes brightened. It could make people not age? Is it really that magical? But it can only make people not age. It can't make them become young again, Zhang Tianyi said. For example, if a 60-year-old man drank the bamboo heart dew, he would not become 50 years old. Instead, his appearance would forever remain that of a 60-year-old. What about bodily functions? Actually, this bamboo heart dew is a liquid that slows down the aging of the human body, but it's mostly external. The internal functions can also slow down aging to a certain extent, but the effect isn't very good. This is also good stuff. You're really willing to give it to me? Of course, no matter how good things are, they are still external objects. All right, I'll reluctantly save your grand disciple. After hanging up the call with Zhang Tianyi, Qin Zhao released Dao Air and Dao San. Sir, this is not a good idea. What's wrong with that? Do you think I'm a volunteer? Qin Zhao interrupted Dao 2 and Dao 3. If you don't think I'm right, then call Zhang Tianyi personally and tell him that you're tired of living. Tell him not to trade with me. Dao Air and Dao San looked at each other and sighed heavily. Then he contacted West and asked him to use his phone to locate them. Soon, Qin Zhao found out their current location. They were now in the desert near the city of San Luis Rio Colorado in Mexico. It was less than 600 kilometers away from Los Angeles. This was within Qin Zhao's expectations. After all, if it was too far, there would definitely be a time difference. When he was teleported to this desert, he had already observed the starry sky. There wasn't much difference. That was why he had guessed that they hadn't moved too far. However, Chen Zhao had to send him on and Little Nine back to the sea first. The two of them were still rolling in the sand. Although they wouldn't get dehydrated at their current speed, they would never be able to return to the sea without help. They were still in San Luis Rio Colorado, but the southern side of the desert was connected to the sea. Along the way, it was all desert. There were no towns or inhabited areas. Qin Zhao looked at everyone. Do you want to go back to Los Angeles yourself? Or do you want me to send you? Aye. Just as Scott Lee was about to speak, Qin Zhao interrupted him. I'm not asking you. Come with me. We're in the country illegally, right? If we leave the Mexican border, we won't be able to explain how we got in, Ronson said helplessly. And we might be arrested as spies. Fine, it doesn't matter if you come with us. Chen Zhao's original goal for this trip was to accept David's request to find and protect Ronson. And him, Ronson said, pointing at Katie. Him. Don't be fooled by his looks. He's actually our undercover agent. Fine. Chen Zhao looked at Dao Er and Dao San. What about you two? If it's convenient, you can take us with you too. They were from the spiritual world, but they'd entered Mexico for no reason. It wasn't easy to leave the regular route. You guys go carry him on. Little Nine, you keep him on occupied. They couldn't agree with the names Chen Zhao had given his pets. For example, Little Nine. Looking at the 100-meter-long hydra, they couldn't tell that it had such a cute name. At first, they were still curious about how Chen Zhao would move these two huge things. But soon they understood. Chen Zhao lifted Amon and Little Nine, who was wrapped around Amon's stomach. They flew into the air and then flew at high speed. Little Nine's weight had already reached 2,000 tons, and Amon's weight was 10 times that of Little Nine. Chen Zhao was actually able to carry these two enormous creatures and fly at an astonishing speed. In less than 10 minutes, they could already see the horizon. Chen Zhao threw Amon's huge body into the sea, raising huge waves. On the other hand, Dao Er, Dao San, Ronson, Katie, and Scott Lee were hung in the air by a bunch of grapes. Fortunately, Chen Zhao didn't plan on carrying them back to Los Angeles. In the end, he let them enjoy a free luxury sea trip. When they arrived in Los Angeles, it was already dawn. Watch your mouths. Chen Zhao looked at Katie and Ronson. Both of them nodded silently. They both knew that Chen Zhao was different from other gangsters. They weren't afraid of gangsters, but they really didn't have the courage to face Chen Zhao. As for Dao Er and Dao San, Chen Zhao couldn't threaten them either. After all, they had Zhang Tianyi, a god, behind them. Let's go, Chen Zhao said, glancing at Scott Lee. Although Scott Lee was extremely unwilling, he still followed behind Chen Zhao. I'll give you a chance to tell your family that you're safe. For a long time in the future, you won't have a chance to contact the outside world again. In the end, Scott Lee called his family and obediently followed Chen Zhao to the headquarters of the Supernatural Organization. Chapter 2410. It was Scott Lee's first time at the Supernatural Organization's headquarters. Perhaps it was because of his first impression. In his imagination, the Supernatural Organization's headquarters must be very mysterious. There was a hint of coldness in every corner. Scott Lee did not know that the coldness he felt was because of the dense, dark clouds above the headquarters. That was the oppressive feeling that the domain gave him. Seeing that Chen Zhao had brought Scott Lee in, West was stunned. He was usually in charge of the Supernatural Organization's affairs, including monitoring the psionic team. Therefore, he roughly knew the names, appearances, and backgrounds of the members of the psionic team. Thus, he knew that Scott Lee was from the psionic team the moment he saw him. Seiji's first thought was whether the other psionic ability teams were also using spies to deal with them, just like they were. Had Chen Zhao been tricked by this guy? But after Chen Zhao explained a little, West understood. Scott Lee was from the psionic team and had seen Chen Zhao's power. If Scott Lee returned to the psionic team and told them about it, perhaps the psionic team would give up on fighting the Supernatural Organization. But it was more likely that they would speed up their actions. By then, it wouldn't be so easy for the Supernatural Organization to deal with the psionic team. That was why Chen Zhao had detained Scott Lee out of caution. I'll leave him to you. Chen Zhao pushed Scott Lee to West's side. West glanced at Scott Lee, who was trembling in fear. Kid, how should I address you? Scott Lee. Lee, why did you choose the psionic team? Why not the Supernatural Organization? Do you have an open recruitment? West was speechless. The Supernatural Organization was an elite organization. Chen Zhao and West had personally gone to inspect and appraise almost every member. Or it was the member's family or someone they could trust. Tell me about the internal affairs of the psionic team. West would not let go of any chance to learn about the psionic team. At this moment, Lind Beyonce walked over angrily. Scott Lee took a few steps back when he saw the murderous look on Lind Beyonce's face. Newbie, am I scary? Are you going to hide from me? Lind Beyonce yelled at Scott Lee with a dark face. Beyonce, how is it? Did you pass the first level? Just a little bit more, and I would have passed. Lind Beyonce gritted her teeth. Although Lindsay Beyonce was half forced to join the supernatural organization. However, after a period of getting along, she had gradually accepted her identity. Of course, with her bad temper, she still refused to give in. He didn't have a good expression when he saw everyone. However, she had provoked a lot of people and was taught a lesson by many. Therefore, she knew that most of the people in the association were stronger than her. There were many people who had taught her a lesson. Basically, the top few people in the association had all taught her a lesson. 2 days ago, after the end of the Battle of Holy Glory, Gaia and the others returned. Lind Beyonce also mocked the 10 people who went to battle. They said that they went to participate in the Battle of Holy Glory, but in the end, only one of them obtained the title of Holy Glory's top 100. It was a complete disgrace. Then she was taught a harsh lesson. Lind Beyonce belonged to the new generation that both Chin Zhao and West thought highly of. Of course, her personality still needed to be polished. The way to do that was to use the iron fists of her friend's love. Just then, an extremely cold aura surged from Scott Lee's back. Scott Lee shivered. Looking back, he realized that it was a spirit. However, a layer of white frost formed on the path the spirit body took. Even though she didn't get close and only passed by him, Scott Lee still felt a chill from the depths of his soul. Seeing Pamela approach, Lind Beyonce stopped talking and retreated. On her 3rd day in the association, she had the honor of witnessing how terrifying Pamela was. The scariest people in the association weren't Gaia, Noah, or Hallease. It was Lady Pamela before her. She was an extremely terrifying banshee. Other than Chun Zhao, no one in the association dared to say that they could defeat Pamela. Of course, Pamela wasn't alone. She also had an army of banshees. They were one of the hidden trump cards of the supernatural organization. However, even without Chin Zhao, the supernatural organization had enough power to protect themselves. If she offended Gaia and the others, she would be bettered in for a few days at most. Even if she talked back to Chin Zhao, he would at most beat her up. But if she offended Pamela, she might turn into a block of ice and be displayed in front of the headquarters for a few days. It was because she had experienced such things. That was why Lind Beyonce kept her distance from Pamela. Okay, time for breakfast. What's this morning? Although Lindsay Beyonce hated the world, the air, and the people and the things that happened were not pleasing to her eyes. However, the 3 meals here were the only things that satisfied her. The ghost chef's cooking was really good. What made her even more addicted were the ingredients here. Everything couldn't be found outside. It was impossible to describe how precious these ingredients were. Many of the food here belonged to the legendary level, especially since Lind Beyonce was an enhancer. She could feel the benefits of the food even more clearly. Not to mention her magic power, her body was at least 5 times stronger than before she joined the supernatural organization. Scott Lee stayed there for a day, even though his freedom was not restricted. He wasn't restricted, but he could clearly feel a pair of eyes watching him. If he dared to step out of the headquarters, he might be beheaded in the next moment. In the evening, Scott Lee saw the people of the supernatural organization building a bonfire with all kinds of ingredients and seasonings. It seemed like they were going to have a bonfire party. At this moment, Gakula was pushing a flatbed cart with a very large piece of meat on it. They couldn't tell what it was, but it was at least 2,000 kilograms. It was a complete piece of meat. Farspen, you're in charge of cooking it. Everyone was looking forward to it too, because it was from Chun Zhao. Chen Zhao didn't tell them what it was, but they were sure that it was a magical beast he'd hunted. From the looks of this piece of meat, it should be a piece of meat from its thigh, but this piece of meat already weighed 2 tons. Then, how big was this magical beast's body? But everyone was already used to it. They were already used to seeing what kind of magical beast Chen Zhao hunted. Chapter 24:11. The piece of meat Chen Zhao had given him was a piece of Red Eagle's thigh. It wasn't even 1/1000th of the Red Eagle's thigh. Red Eagle's body was too huge. When it spread its wings, it could cover the entire city. His body was as big as a mountain. Back then, Chen Zhao couldn't do anything about Red Eagle. He couldn't finish such a huge body by himself. That was why he gave it to his own people. If everyone worked together, they might be able to eat Red Eagle into a skeleton in 100 years. Of course, that was if the number of members in the association increased by several times. With just a few dozen people, they wouldn't be able to finish such a huge Red Eagle in 1,000 years. But Chen Zhao didn't mind. Anyway, that thing wouldn't rot in his space ring. If he couldn't finish it, then so be it. Chen Zhao was still troubled by the mutant octopus. The scale of the disaster was still expanding. A few coastal cities on the west coast were all in trouble. Chen Zhao had hoped that Isaac could provide him with clues about Homesius. But Isaac couldn't find anyone either. Just as Chen Zhao was having a headache, someone he didn't expect called him. "Hey, Chen, it's Gavich." "Huh. Gavich, what's up? I heard you're in trouble. You're not calling to mock me, are you? Or you're the culprit? Oh, your main business is producing chemical materials. Did you release something you shouldn't have and cause this disaster?" "Chin, I'm a legal businessman." Lila Gavich chuckled. "I was going to give you some information, but since you don't need it, forget it." "Ha, I'm joking. Where are you now? I'll go find you. I brewed a batch of good wine recently." It was Chen Zhao's first time visiting Lila Gavich's house. Lila Gavich was the largest chemical producer in America. He was much richer than Chen Zhao. Although Chen Zhao was rich, he'd only made it in the past 2 years. But Lila Gavich was different. He'd accumulated it for decades. Chen Zhao didn't even dare to imagine how rich he was. In America, one had to have an extremely deep background to play with a few industries. Energy, medicine, and chemical industries were all controlled by traditional families. It was almost impossible for outsiders to intervene, even if it was to develop a new product. This new product would either be sold to those tycoons or all sorts of dirty water. Lila Gavich lived in Beverly Hills. However, it was not in the coastal area. Instead, it was halfway up a mountain. Looking down from here, one could see the entire horizon. Lila Gavich's villa was different from Chen Zhao's modern and technological feeling. His manor was filled with the stench of a nobleman. Chen Zhao had been to many manors of rich people. Lila Gavich's villa might not be the biggest or the most luxurious, but every little thing here was filled with a sense of exquisiteness and taste. This reminded him of the British drama Downton Abbey that Fei Lai had forced him to watch. Chen Zhao didn't really look at it, but everything here looked like an old-fashioned English noble's manor in British dramas. Everything here was simple but not old, deep but not gloomy. Here, there was also the bright and beautiful sunlight, as well as the boundless spring scenery. Lila Gavich was wearing a formal suit. He had a table and a chair on the huge lawn, leisurely drinking afternoon tea. When Chen Zhao walked up to Lila Gavich, the servant had already come over to add a chair. "You know how to enjoy yourself." "Rich people do," Lila Gavich said. The servant went up to add some refreshments for Chen Zhao. "How did you know I was in trouble?" Chen Zhao asked curiously. "I've been paying attention to the supernatural organization," Lila Gavich said with a smile. Lila Gavich said with a smile. "And the mutant octopus attacks in recent days are not a secret. Although the news media has been banned, it is not difficult for most rich people to find out about it." "What news did you get?" Two pieces of information. Lila Gavich placed the two pieces of information before Chen Zhao. One is about Homesius, and the other is about the new news agency's research institute. You know the progress of my investigation. Chen Zhao asked, confused. You investigated Homesius through an intermediary company. You want to know what's going on with the house called Homesius. Do you think the intermediary company can keep the secret? Then what's the situation with the research institute? They're the culprits of the mutant octopus attack. You actually found out about this? Coincidentally, I sell chemical products, and this Xinsha Research Institute is one of my company's clients. Then what about Homesius? What's his situation? He's the person in charge of the research institute, but we haven't found out who the sponsor is yet. All the money that goes into the research institute is through an anonymous overseas account. We can't find out. Then we only need the research institute's address. We don't need Homesius information, right? All the equipment and researchers of the Xinsha Research Institute disappeared overnight. Now, the Xinsha Research Institute still owes my company tens of millions of dollars in payments. You're saying that they've already run away? Yes. Chen Zhao couldn't help but look gloomy. With a headache, he asked, Are the leads broken? There's another direction we can investigate. Lila Gavich's gaze landed on Homesius information in Chen Zhao's hands. Homesius? He should have disappeared too, right? Yes, indeed. Homesius disappeared too. But his family moved frequently in the past few years. They're living on a small ranch in the suburbs of Los Angeles now. You're not asking me to capture Homesius' family, right? There's a rule in the spiritual world that we shouldn't harm family members. This wasn't a rule, but it was also the bottom line. Chen Zhao didn't want to touch this bottom line. I didn't say I'm going to touch Homesius' family, but my people are already secretly monitoring them. That should be fine, right? Chen Zhao nodded. That was fine. Chen Zhao wasn't that pedantic. Even the police often monitored the families of suspects in order to catch them. I'll also send people to monitor Homesius' family. Of course, aside from the 10 million, I have nothing to do with this. Chapter 2412. For Lila Gavich, perhaps $10 million really wasn't much. It was the same for Chen Zhao. Perhaps he could spend more than that once. But if it was in the business world, they would fight for every cent. Two teams of lawyers might argue for a few months just for 1% of profit. This was very common in the business world. So Lila Gavich couldn't be as indifferent as he seemed. Chen Zhao was the same. For example, the movies he, Steven, and Rasp invested in. The three of them could give each other millions or even tens of millions of dollars in gifts. But they couldn't be short of the share of the box office, even if it was just a cent. That was the bottom line of business investment. A cent less today might mean a zero tomorrow. Of course, the reason why Lila Gavich let Chen Zhao deal with him was mainly because he wanted to do Chen Zhao a favor. He wanted to do Chen Zhao a favor. Or rather, he wanted to return the favor. The two of them had been through life and death together. After all, he'd fallen into hell back then. Chen Zhao had killed his way into hell. From then on, he understood how terrifying Chen Zhao was. He also knew that having an ally and friend like Chen Zhao was something to be grateful for. Of course, the $10 million debt was another matter. If he had the chance, he wouldn't give up on the debt from the New Society Research Institute. Just because he wanted to do Chen Zhao a favor didn't mean he would give up on the 10 million. Should we go to the Research Institute? Maybe we can find some clues. Is it far from here? Not really. Actually, I've never been there before. Saying that, Lila Gavich turned to the servant beside him. Call Merlin here. Merlin? Who is it? Oh, one of my lawyers, Lila Gavich said. Because the New Society Research Institute can't pay up and they're suspected of maliciously defaulting. They're planning to use the Research Institute to pay off the debt. She's also responsible for this. Qin Zhao had thought that Merlin was a beautiful lawyer like Alex. But when Merlin came, Qin Zhao was greatly disappointed. Merlin was already more than 50 years old. Although he was dressed simply and professionally, Merlin was already in his 50s. However, he didn't have the feeling Qin Zhao had expected. Merlin didn't know Qin Zhao, so he only greeted Lila Gavich. "Boss." "Well, how's the situation at the Xinsha Research Institute?" At present, because the court can't find the legal person, it ruled that the Xinsha Research Institute has seriously breached the contract and maliciously defaulted on the payment. The court has agreed to our request. Now the Xinsha Research Institute and the surrounding land are ours. You've done well. Take us to the Xian Sha Research Institute. I want to see my new territory. Qin Zhao and Lila Gavich sat in the back seat, chatting casually. Although Merlin was driving, she could be said to be observant and attentive. She had been listening to their conversation. She was curious about who Qin Zhao was. "Have you had any use for your Hydra recently?" asked Lila Gavich. "What? Are you going to see?" "Yeah, I'm taking a few foreign partners out to play, so I'm going to borrow your Hydra. You don't have a yacht." Lila Gavich was much richer than Qin Zhao. Therefore, Qin Zhao didn't believe that Lila Gavich didn't have a yacht. "Yes, I have 2 yachts, but they're both more than 20 years old. Most of the equipment can't keep up with the times. It's fine if it's a normal trip, but I'm using it to entertain a few super rich people. The 2 yachts aren't very presentable." "Oh, then send someone to my house to get them," Qin Zhao said. Qin Zhao didn't have any plans to go out to sea, so he generously lent the Hydra to Lila Gavich. Merlin's heart jumped. This Asian man was also rich. She'd boarded Lila Gavich's yacht before. Just luxurious wasn't enough to describe the 2 super yachts. But even those extravagant super yachts weren't enough. Then how luxurious would the yacht that Lila Gavich borrowed from Qin Zhao be? "Do you have any large investments recently?" Lila Gavich asked again. "Huh, why do you ask that? Your friends have recently been selling some second and third-tier assets to cash out, and they have also made large loans with the bank. This situation is either they are in urgent need of money, or there is a financial shock. If it is a financial shock, it is impossible for me to not know about it, so I can only guess that they are in urgent need of money and are making some kind of investment." The so-called second-tier assets were those whose annual profits didn't exceed 1 to 2% of the investment. Basically, after deducting the interest from the debt, the second-tier assets would at most not lose money. It was far from a profit. Nevertheless, even the second-tier assets were still very popular in the financial market. For example, the big shots on Wall Street didn't lack money. What they lacked was how to turn their cash into assets that wouldn't depreciate. On the other hand, the third-tier assets were those that were below the profit line. They might lose a little this year and make a little profit next year. They could barely break even and survive. If the third-tier assets could be sold at a break-even price, the second-tier assets could be sold at a premium of more than 20%. The bank would classify and evaluate the assets. For example, the first-tier assets were considered high-quality assets. The second-tier assets were assets with more than 5% profit. These assets were hard to come by. There were also super and excellent assets. It was normal for them to be sold at a premium of 200 or 300%. For example, Qin Zhao's Marina restaurant was an excellent asset. The bank's valuation was only 80 million, but it had considerable profit. Even if someone offered 5 times that, there would still be people fighting for it. As for Qin Zhao's Mountain Brewery and brand, they were priceless treasures. Perhaps Mountain Brewery's market valuation couldn't even enter the world's top 500, but its profit could enter the world's top 100. Those people are all your friends. At present, the total amount of funds they have raised should be more than 3 billion USD, and you have a lot of cash on hand. Based on my estimation, the cash on hand should be more than 1. $5 billion, so I have to suspect that their intention to borrow cash and loans is to have some kind of investment project. Hearing their conversation, Merlin felt his heart skip a beat. Wasn't this man too rich? What did $5 billion in cash mean? Even the richest man in the world didn't have $5 billion in cash. It would even be difficult for them to take out $100 million on the spot. But this man actually had $5 billion. Chapter 24:13. There's a project. If you have spare cash, you can use a few $100 million and put it in your account for a month or two. Your and your friend's cash flow should be close to $5 billion, right? Isn't it enough? It's not enough, Qin Zhao said. It's just that the plate is too big. No amount of money is enough. Qin Zhao wasn't going to build a normal coastal island. He was going to build a super resort like Hawaii. The amount of money he needed in the early stage was gone. This didn't even include the subsequent investment. So, this project wasn't something normal people could afford. What project? I can't tell you yet, Qin Zhao said. Lila Gavich thought about it. The project Qin Zhao was talking about didn't even have a shadow yet. To him, even if the project disappeared, he would only lose 1 or 2 months of interest. It wasn't a big deal. Okay, I'll prepare it later. What's the maximum investment? Prepare as much as you have. It depends on your appetite. The more you invest, the more shares you'll get. How big is this project? I don't think there'll be such a big project in the world in the next 10 years, Qin Zhao said. Mr. Qin, how much money do I need to be qualified? Merlin asked while driving. Sorry, I can't qualify no matter how much money you have, Qin Zhao said, smiling. When Qin Zhao was distributing the cake, he also looked at the people. Acquaintances depended on whether they had enough capital, connections, and influence. For example, a celebrity like Stephen was welcomed by 99% of the investment projects in the world. As for those he wasn't familiar with, Qin Zhao wouldn't let them in no matter how much money they had. He didn't even have enough for his own family. Why should he give it to outsiders? Merlin smiled and shook her head. She obviously knew what Qin Zhao meant. However, she was only asking a probing question. She didn't think that Qin Zhao would let a stranger in. Soon, they arrived at the New Press Research Institute. Qin Zhao looked at the building before him. It was around 7 or 8 stories tall. There was a large, empty space around it for greenery. This building costs 2 or 3 million, right? This building can barely make up for it, Lila Gavich said disapprovingly. Let's go in and take a look inside. Boss, Mr. Chen, this building was originally used for some experimental research. We found some chemical materials in there earlier. I haven't sent people in to disinfect and clean it up. If we go in now, there's a certain risk. I'm a chemical producer. Why would I be afraid of those chemicals? Lila Gavich said with a smile. Those chemicals don't know the boss. It's okay. I brought a doctor with me. He knows better than I do what's dangerous. Doctor? Merlin was stunned at first, but he quickly reacted. Mr. Chen is a doctor? I'm a doctor, Qin Zhao answered. Merlin did not expect Qin Zhao to be a doctor. Of course, Qin Zhao was an illegal doctor too. Even though Qin Zhao was a professor, he didn't have the qualifications to practice medicine. If I can't get the money back, although this building can barely cover the interest, I'll still need to invest a lot of money to repair and use the building. In the end, I won't be able to earn anything. Lila Gavich was a very smart businessman. He was different from normal businessmen. Normal businessmen thought that if they bought something for $5 and sold it for $10, they would earn $5. But Lila Gavich considered more complicated things, such as the time cost, investment profits, interest, currency depreciation, and so on. Even a lawyer like Merlin felt emotional. Just a moment ago, the two had been discussing investments of hundreds of millions or even billions of dollars. Now, they had to carefully calculate the investment of $1 or $2 million. But this was the basic quality of a successful businessman. A businessman who could not be calculative was not a qualified businessman. Chen Zhao, Lilagevic, and Merlin walked around the building. They did not find anything valuable. "It's a little strange," Merlin suddenly said. "What's strange?" "The amount of materials in the building is wrong." "What's wrong?" "Didn't the original person in charge move them away?" "What's strange about that?" Neither Chen Zhao nor Lilagevic understood what Merlin meant. "First of all, they moved in a hurry. Also, they moved secretly, so there can't be too big of a commotion," Merlin said. Merlin said, "Based on the amount of chemical raw materials our company sold to them, the cost of taking these raw materials away is very high. We just walked around the building, and there are a few individual laboratories that still have a lot of raw materials that have not been opened. There are also a lot of raw materials that have not been opened in the warehouse. Many of these raw materials are not cheap, but the remaining raw materials do not match the total amount. Think about it. If it were you, under what circumstances would you choose to transport some raw materials away? And under what circumstances would you choose to transport some raw materials away?" This, Qin Zhao and Lilagevic glanced at each other. "What does this mean?" "It means that there's a second warehouse here. The new Society Research Institute's building is very clear, so the second warehouse might not be above ground," Merlin said. Merlin said, "Although I don't know why they want to take the chemical materials from all the suspicious points. They do have a second warehouse." Chun Zhao and Lilagevic had to admit that Merlin's thinking was very sharp. At least, they hadn't thought about this possibility. "Oh, the button in the elevator seemed to indicate an underground parking lot," Qin Zhao said. "But there's already an open-air parking lot here. I don't think they'd make another one, right? Let's go take a look. We'll know soon." The three entered the elevator again and pressed the button for floor 1. When the elevator door opened, Chen Zhao, Lilagevic, and Merlin were all shocked. It wasn't a hidden warehouse below. Instead, it was an underground laboratory that was even larger than the buildings above ground. "I didn't expect such a large, underground space to be hidden here. Boss, since this is a hidden laboratory, it means that some secret experiments have been done here. We might be in danger if we go in while wearing isolation suits." "It's fine. For Chin, nothing can trouble him," Lilagevic said confidently. Lilagevic said confidently, "If you're scared, you can wait for us up there." Chapter 24:14. Merlin didn't leave. After all, this was the time to show her loyalty. With her shrewdness, she wouldn't abandon her boss at a time like this. Qin Zhao and Lilagevic walked in front. There were some water stains on the ground, but it wasn't very dirty overall. After all, they'd only moved here 1 or 2 days ago. "This place makes me uncomfortable," Lilagevic said. "There's a magnetic field in the air here," Qin Zhao said. "It's probably because some equipment is still running. Even I can't sense further away." Qin Zhao knew what Lilagevic meant by discomfort. There was a special magnetic field here. It wasn't dangerous, but it was attached to people's skin. There was a special magnetic field here, but it wasn't dangerous. Qin Zhao didn't realize that there was an underground lab when he was above ground. It was also because of the magnetic field here. "There shouldn't be anything here," Merlin said. "They've moved all the valuable equipment away. The remaining chemicals aren't enough to pay off the debt. I want to know what equipment created the magnetic field here and how much it's worth," Lilagevic said. "Maybe it's not just equipment. There's something else." "What?" Chen Zhao smiled and didn't answer. There was a faint smell of blood in the air. Apart from that, there was also a fishy smell. Chen Zhao's first reaction was that it was seafood. The three took the elevator down to a deeper area. Thankfully, it wasn't dark and the basic lighting was still intact. Just then, the three saw a room up ahead. There was a sign saying monitoring room on the door. As soon as they reached the door, they saw a line of blood on the ground. Judging from the bloodstains, it seemed like something was dragging a corpse. "Let's go in and take a look," Qin Zhao said. Merlin followed behind. She was very uncomfortable with this place. There was a row of screens in the monitoring room, but there were still blood splatters on them. "Boss, Mr. Chin, how about we leave first?" Merlin tried to persuade them again. However, Qin Zhao and Lila Gainic ignored Merlin's request. Qin Zhao turned on the screen and switched to the scene from 2 days ago. What appeared on the screen was the scene of the researchers and workers busily moving the equipment away. However, Qin Zhao and Lila Gainic noticed that one of the screens was recording what had happened in the lab. The workers were using hammers to break the glass containers along the way. Then, a large amount of liquid flowed out of the glass container, along with some deformed things. These deformed things seemed to be artificially bred, but they were not creatures that ordinary people knew of. Their upper bodies were like snakes, their heads and bodies were slender, but they had a pair of short, thick claws. When Merlin saw those deformed creatures, his face instantly became very ugly. The three of them continued to watch the surveillance footage. Suddenly, one of the deformed creatures went berserk. The deformed creature suddenly wrapped itself around a worker's neck and then directly covered the worker's head with a bloody mouth. The worker struggled a little and fell to the ground. When the other workers saw this, they wanted to come forward to help, but soon more deformed creatures released from the containers woke up. These deformed creatures immediately turned the laboratory into a field of blood and flesh splattering everywhere. At this time, the alarm sounded. At the same time, the camera was also destroyed, and there was no image after that. However, there were other images, and the figures of the deformed creatures appeared one after another in other images. The researchers began to evacuate even faster. Meanwhile, the security personnel were exchanging fire with the deformed creatures. However, many people were dragged into the shadows by the deformed creatures. Qin Zhao looked at the surveillance footage. "Is this a scene from a movie?" "Maybe reality," Lila Gavich said with a bitter smile. By now, Merlin's face had already turned pale from fear because he saw one of the images. This was what had happened in the surveillance room. A deformed creature had appeared at the door of the surveillance room. At that time, the people in the room had been in a hurry to leave. In the end, the two collided head-on. After a series of struggles, the person was forcibly pulled out of the surveillance room. At that time, the person had not died yet. He was dragged all the way, letting out heart-wrenching screams. "Check if there's any signal on your phone," Lila Gavich said. Merlin hurriedly took out his phone and looked at Lila Gavich miserably. "We're at least 20 meters from the ground. There's no signal at all." "Forget it," Lila Gavich cursed. "Let's just leave here. So unlucky. We'll have to spend some money to clean this place up again." The three came to the elevator, but the indicator light showed that it was floor -6. But no matter how they pressed, the elevator would not reach their floor. "Looks like the elevator here can't be used," Qin Zhao said helplessly. "Let's take the stairs." "There's no stairs here," Lila Gavich said. "How do you know?" Qin Zhao asked, confused. Lila Gavich pointed at a map on a nearby pillar. "This elevator seems to be blocked on purpose." "It's probably those things," Qin Zhao said. "From the surveillance footage, those things are quite intelligent. What do we do now?" Merlin's face paled. "Maybe we can find another way around," Lila Gavich said. "Then what if we encounter those things?" Merlin looked at Qin Zhao and Lila Gavich in fear. "In terms of probability, it's the same everywhere. We can encounter those things," Lila Gavich said. "And in terms of survival, it's much more likely to survive if you're with two men than if you're alone." Qin Zhao looked at the pale-faced Merlin and added another blow. "Of course, if we encounter a large number of those things, we'll have a much higher chance of survival if we push you out and escape." "Ah!" Merlin screamed in fright. "Don't be so scared. I'm just joking." How could she not be scared? Merlin only felt that even staying with Qin Zhao and Lila Gavich had become very dangerous. Who knew if they would really use her as bait, as they had joked? "Don't come near me." Suddenly, Merlin took out a pepper spray and aimed it at the two. Chun Zhao and Lila Gavich's expressions froze. They were indeed joking, but Merlin seemed to take their joke seriously. 9 Heavens, Divine Emperor. Chapter 24:15. Just then, Merlin had already sprayed the pepper spray. Chun Zhao had seen it earlier and retreated first. Lila Gainic, on the other hand, was not so lucky. She was sprayed directly into her eyes. Merlin, you lunatic, you're fired, Lila Gainic roared as she screamed. Merlin did not care about his job at all. Seeing that Lila Gainic had been sprayed by the pepper spray, she turned and ran. However, she was wearing high heels and could not run fast enough. Chin, why didn't you help me? Merlin is such an idiot. She's pissing me off. Lila Gage still couldn't open his eyes. Chun Zhao looked into Lila Gage's eyes. Her eyes were red and swollen as tears streamed down her cheeks. Is there any way to relieve the pain? My eyes and the skin on my face are burning. It's too painful. There's no way, Chun Zhao said helplessly. But while it's painful to be hit by the anti-pervert spray, there aren't any side effects. The effect only lasts around 10 minutes, after which the pain will subside. However, the pain will last for a day or two. I don't need a diagnosis. Lila Gainic was still crying. It was too painful. It was also the first time in his life that he was attacked by a pepper spray. Merlin was in a panic and did not know where to go. After running for a while, she realized what was going on. She had reacted too violently just now. But now, when he tried to find his way back, he realized that the layout of this place was all over the place. Every road was the same. Merlin was dumbfounded. What should she do? The place she was at now was not as bright as before. Some of the corridors had even turned into deep abysses. Merlin was panicking now. Everything was silent. It was so quiet that Merlin could hear his own heartbeat. Just then, Merlin heard the sound of water dripping. Suddenly, Merlin felt something cold on his arm. Liquid dripped onto it. Merlin looked up. In that instant, she felt like her head was about to explode. A deformed creature had appeared above her without her knowing. The deformed creature moved too stealthily. She could not sense how it had appeared at all. Merlin screamed. He instinctively picked up the pepper spray and sprayed it wildly. Cough, cough! He had to admit the power of the anti-wolf spray. Even this deformed creature could not resist the pungent smell of the pepper spray. It was originally stuck to the ceiling, but it was sprayed to the ground by Melinda's anti-pervert spray. His mouth was constantly making strange noises, and his head was hitting everywhere. Merlin grabbed his high heels and used them to slap the deformed creature. Wow! The deformed creature let out a high-pitched cry. Merlin had actually used the heel of his high heels to pierce one of the deformed creature's eyes. At this moment, Merlin could not care about anything else. He turned around and ran. The deformed creature was extremely adaptable. It quickly adapted to the anti-wolf spray and chased after Merlin. Merlin was no longer wearing high heels. She had already realized that wearing high heels would only make her die faster. However, this high heel was her only weapon, and she was reluctant to throw it away. She grabbed it in her hand and ran. One of the deformed monster's eyes had been maimed by Merlin, and it was still foaming with blood. However, it seemed to be very unaccustomed to this state, causing its actions to be very abnormal. Its speed was obviously much faster than Merlin's, but it was like a drunkard, constantly hitting the walls on both sides of the corridor as it ran. This had also bought Merlin a lot of time, even though Merlin was old. Although Merlin was old, it was time to risk her life. Merlin had used all her physical strength to fight desperately. Those deformed creatures would not pity her age. Merlin ran wildly. At this moment, Merlin saw an open door. He rushed into the room and closed the door. Bang, bang. Outside the door came the sound of the monster hitting. Every hit was like hitting Merlin's heart. Fortunately, the door of this room was a completely stainless steel iron door, and its thickness was amazing. This door was like the anti-theft door of a vault. No matter how the deformed creature hit it, the iron door still stood. However, just from the sound of the impact, one could feel how strong the deformed creature was. Ordinary people could not fight against this kind of creature at all. At this time, the place that Merlin escaped into was the underground laboratory's computer room. This computer room was not small. In the center of the computer room was a large iron ball with a diameter of 5 or 6 meters. Around the iron ball, many cables were connected. There were also many instruments around. This should be the power supply system of the entire underground laboratory. Merlin looked at the big iron ball and then looked at the surrounding instruments. This seemed to be the alpha power supply system. Merlin recognized this huge set of energy supply instruments. She was not an expert in electrodynamics, but she had a high degree. Some things that she had not touched did not mean that she had not heard of them. As for the alpha power supply system, she had seen it in a university course 30 years ago. But at that time, it was still a concept, an extremely advanced power supply system. Today's power supply systems were wind, water, coal, or nuclear power generation. The alpha power supply system was non-kinetic power generation, using chemical power generation. Through the fusion of several special chemical elements, it could produce a very large amount of electricity. However, this power supply system was later proved to have a big defect. Then it was listed as a dangerous design and was permanently banned. Unexpectedly, today he saw a complete alpha power supply system here. Even if Merlin was not an expert in this field, he knew that the cost of this alpha power supply system was even higher than the cost of the entire laboratory. Just as Merlin was admiring the masterpiece in front of him, he suddenly saw a few terrifying figures, a few deformed creatures. They were climbing along the cables to the ball and then looked straight at Merlin. Merlin felt that her heart was about to stop beating. Her mind was empty. At this moment, she was exhausted and had no strength to resist. Moreover, even if she had the strength, she did not have the mind. Those deformed creatures jumped down from the metal ball, but they did not bite Merlin to death. One of the strongest deformed creatures opened its mouth and spat out a mouthful of saliva. The saliva fell on Merlin's body. Merlin immediately felt that his body was completely paralyzed. His body could not move at all. At this time, the deformed creature stretched out its tail and curled up Merlin, climbing toward the left side of the power supply room. Chapter 24:16. Not long after, the deformed creature that had wrapped Merlin with its tail stopped. Then, the deformed creature flicked its tail, and Merlin landed on the iron net. Merlin realized that these deformed creatures did not seem to intend to eat her, at least not for the time being. There were still many deformed creatures patrolling the surrounding passages. Merlin wanted to move her body, but she could only feel a little of her limbs. Moreover, the remaining saliva of the deformed creatures on her body was coagulating and gluing her to the iron net. Give up. Don't waste your energy. At this moment, a voice came from the side. Merlin turned her head and saw a man in a white coat. The man's eyes were lifeless, and his voice was very weak. You're a researcher here? It's obvious, isn't it? The man said weakly. Are these the results of your research? They can only be considered to have been cultivated by us. We can't research these things, the man said. When I came here, there were already their eggs. Later, through cultivation and reproduction, it reached the scale we have today. What are these things? Do you know the Quetzalcoatlus of the Inca civilization? I've heard of them. You mean they're Quetzalcoatlus, but they look like a bunch of baldies. There's not a single hair on their bodies. They don't look like Quetzalcoatlus at all. They're the original forms of Quetzalcoatlus, the man said. The man said the origin of the first eggs in the lab was unknown, but through research, we found that they were highly intelligent and sociable. Therefore, the people who studied with me at the time believed that their civilization might have existed a long time ago. So what are they going to do to us now? Eat us? Or use us as food for winter? Merlin asked with a hint of self-mockery. She did not have much hope for survival research. At least, she did not see any hope of survival. Look up. Merlin turned her head and looked straight up. In the shadows of the ceiling that was covered with various pipes, there were wet meat eggs hanging. Merlin swallowed. She had already realized something. You've seen aliens, right? Even though Merlin's body was in a state of paralysis, she still felt unprecedented fear. The Quetzalcoatlus we see now are all cultivated in the laboratory's container trough, so their development is extremely incomplete. They can only be considered subspecies. The man said, after the real feathered serpent god emerges from the egg, it needs to drill into the body of a large mammal before it can grow into a real feathered serpent god. As for the process, you can refer to the facehugger in Alien. How did you know? I'm not the only one who was captured here. When the lab was evacuated, people were captured by these subspecies. At this moment, a huge creature emerged from a circular passageway. Its size was similar to those subspecies, but it was much larger. In terms of weight alone, they were more than 5 times larger than normal subspecies. Unlike the subspecies that crawled on the ground, their upper bodies were propped up, just like humans. The lower half of its body wriggled forward like a snake. They had colorful feathers on their backs and armpits. This was obviously the Quetzalcoatlus that the researcher beside him was talking about. Huh. Quetzalcoatl let out a strange cry. The surrounding subspecies all lowered their heads, not daring to raise their heads. They were as humble as commoners in front of nobles. At this moment, the feathered serpent god moved into a water trough. Merlin heard the sound of an electric motor starting up. Then, the lights around the water trough lit up. The water trough where the feathered serpent god was connected to many cables, which seemed to be connected to electricity. In the water trough, it let out strange cries. What is it doing? Absorbing electricity, the researcher said. Quetzalcoatlus seems to be able to absorb electricity, and they have very high intelligence. No one has taught them how to use the equipment here. But in the past 2 days, I've watched them go from fumbling around to now being proficient in using it. You can't imagine how smart they are. Merlin felt that his scalp was about to explode. Of course, he understood the meaning of the researcher's words. Even humans would not dare to say that they could learn to operate such complicated electrical equipment without any relevant experience, let alone other species. If it was just physical strength, it would not be enough to threaten the entire human community. After all, there were many animals on Earth that were stronger than humans. But what if there was a species that was stronger and smarter than humans? What about their reproductive ability? The researcher glanced at Merlin from the corner of his eyes. As long as they have enough food, they only need 1 night to complete their mating, laying eggs, and hatching into larvae. After the larvae burrow into a mammal's body and eat the mammal's body, it takes a day for them to become semi-mature. Take that feathered serpent god, for example. Its actual age is only 20 hours. Hearing the researcher's words, Merlin was beyond shocked. You people are crazy. How dare you research this kind of thing? It's too late to say that now. Besides, I'm just a researcher. In terms of work, I'm no different from an engineer. Even if I don't accept this job, someone else will. The researcher completely removed his responsibility. Although what he said was the truth, Merlin was so angry that she gritted her teeth. However, she had no way to teach the researcher a lesson at this moment. She could not even protect herself now. At that moment, a piece of flesh above them suddenly burst open. A huge amount of liquid poured down, drenching both of them. Of course, if it was just the liquid pouring down, it would not have made them panic. There was something else that came down with the liquid. It was a young, feathered serpent god. This young, feathered serpent god looked pink and a little cute. However, as long as it was associated with the facehugger, no one would think it cute anymore. The young feathered serpent god began to crawl toward the researcher. The researcher was so scared that he trembled all over and made a ho sound. The young feathered serpent god hesitated for a moment before turning around and crawling toward Merlin. Merlin was scared out of her wits. Only now did she understand how this researcher had managed to survive for the past 2 days to the last one. Merlin also wanted to make that sound, so she tried to make a ho sound. However, the young feathered serpent god did not stop. It had already crawled to Merlin's chest. Merlin could feel the chilly sensation when the young Quetzalcoatl god came into contact with her skin. Merlin was so scared that she was silent. Her breathing became rapid. Chapter 24:17. Death was approaching her bit by bit. Merlin could almost see the grim reaper waving at her. The young serpent god seemed to see it too. Suddenly, Merlin woke up. How was this the grim reaper? It was Chun Zhao. Chun Zhao was standing before Merlin and waving at her. You. Merlin stared at Chun Zhao, dumbfounded. Just then, the young serpent god jumped up and pounced at Chun Zhao. Chun Zhao reached out and lifted the young serpent god's tail. Is this the serpent god? Chun Zhao looked at the researcher. Does it taste good? The young serpent god kept struggling in Chun Zhao's hand. It even turned around and bit Chun Zhao's hand, but it was so small. How could it bite Chun Zhao, who had thick skin? Just then, Merlin saw Lila Gavik come to. Standing beside Chun Zhao, Lila Gavich's eyes were still red and swollen. His eyes weren't big to begin with, but now there were only 2 slits left. Merlin, good job. Look at what you've done to me. Merlin opened her mouth, but didn't say anything. She really didn't understand why these two had the courage to stand before her. Couldn't they tell what was going on? Couldn't they see the surrounding subspecies and the huge adult serpent god? Lila Gavik snatched the young serpent god from Chun Zhao's hand. Apologize immediately, or I'll stuff this thing into your mouth. Before Merlin could apologize, Lila Gavik was bitten by the young serpent god. Lila Gavik's hand hurt. He tossed the young serpent god to the ground and stepped on it. The young serpent god was smashed to pieces. By then, the other subspecies and the huge adult serpent god had already noticed Chun Zhao and Lila Gavik's arrival. After noticing that Lila Gavik had killed one of their offspring, all the serpents were enraged. The mature feathered serpent god spread its arms, and the feathers on its body stood up. This was clearly a sign of their anger. The mature feathered serpent god, let out a strange cry. The other subspecies immediately surrounded Chun Zhao and Lila Gavik. Merlin and the researcher had already sentenced Chun Zhao and Lila Gavik to death in their hearts. To them, Chun Zhao and Lila Gavik had no chance of survival at all. Just then, a subspecies charged toward Chun Zhao. He spat out a mouthful of saliva as soon as he opened his mouth. Merlin and the researcher counted in their hearts. 3, 2, 1 down, but Chun Zhao didn't fall. Chun Zhao looked at his wet body. It spat at me. Lila Gavik nodded. He'd seen Chun Zhao fight against millions of demons, but he had never seen a demon who dared to spit at him. He had to admit that the baldy in front of him was quite courageous. Fuck! Chun Zhao lifted his foot and kicked the subspecies away. The subspecies slammed into the concrete wall a dozen meters away. The concrete wall cracked, and the subspecies fell to the ground, motionless. Merlin and the researcher were dumbfounded. What kind of strength was that? Not only was this man not afraid of the subspecies' paralyzing saliva, but he could even fight back and kick a subspecies to death? Just then, the second subspecies pounced over. Careful! Merlin shouted with all his might. But just then, she saw Chun Zhao grab the subspecies' upper and lower jaws and pull hard. The subspecies' mouth was pried open. Seeing Chun Zhao twist it, it let go. The subspecies slid to the ground and didn't move. The researcher's heart was in turmoil. Others might not know, but he knew all the data of these subspecies. The strongest carnivorous creature on land was undoubtedly the Manchurian tiger. Siberian tigers could be over 3 meters long and weigh 400 kilograms. They had 80% muscle and 400 kilograms of bite force. They could run at 80 kilometers per hour and hit 800 kilograms with their forelimbs. Their stats were almost 2 to 3 times that of the best human boxers, weightlifters, and sprinters. They were also bodybuilders. But the subspecies stats surpassed the Siberian tiger in all aspects. They also had tails as powerful as anacondas. They could crush 1,500 kilograms. At the same time, they had intelligence close to humans. Chen Zhao actually tore open the upper and lower jaws of such a terrifying creature and killed it with a twist of his head. Just then, the mature feathered serpent god let out a strange cry and charged over. Seeing the body several times larger than the subspecies, Merlin and the researcher felt death waving at them. But just then, Chen Zhao blocked the attack with one hand. He grabbed the upper jaw of the mature Quetzalcoatl and swept it horizontally. The surrounding subspecies were all smashed into pieces. Chen Zhao threw it again. The mature feathered serpent god smashed into the concrete wall. Merlin and the researcher were dumbfounded. They couldn't say anything for a long time. That mature feathered serpent god weighed at least 1,500 kilograms, right? Chen Zhao smashed it away just like that. Not dead? Such tenacious vitality. Chen Zhao was surprised. He'd thought his strength was enough, but he'd underestimated this guy. Just then, the mature feathered serpent climbed back up. It crouched low and hissed at Chen Zhao with its teeth bared. Immediately after, lightning surged on the body of the mature feathered serpent god. The researcher's eyes widened. It was his first time seeing this too. Chen Zhao looked left and right. He broke a golden pipe and held it in his hand. Then he strode toward the mature feathered serpent god. Before it could attack, Chen Zhao had already smashed it with his rod. The mature feathered serpent god died on the spot. Half of its head was smashed. Of course, the steel pipe in Chen Zhao's hand was deformed too. The researcher and Merlin were dumbfounded. The seemingly invincible feathered serpent god had been killed by Chen Zhao with a single strike. He hadn't even used his ultimate move. How could he be so shameless? He should at least give it a chance to use its ultimate move. This place is connected to all directions, Chen Zhao said. There are probably many that escaped. Bring the 2 of them with you. I'll go take a look. Lila Gavik knew Chen Zhao's style of doing things very well. She wasn't worried about Chen Zhao at all. This scene wasn't even a warm-up for Chen Zhao. Divine King of the 9 Heavens. Chapter 24:18. Lila Genovich poured an unknown potion into Merlin and the researcher's mouth. Merlin and the researcher felt the numbness in their bodies gradually recede. They could stand up again in a few minutes. Can you stand up now? Lila Genovich asked. Merlin tried and stood up. The researcher still felt powerless. I can't stand up. If you can't, then lie down and wait to be eaten. Lila Gavik said disapprovingly, I'm a billionaire. Do you still want me to carry you? As expected, the researcher stood up immediately. In times of life and death, all pretentiousness and weakness were not worth mentioning. Merlin followed Lila Genovich in silence. Lila Genovich cursed along the way. He vented all his resentment on Merlin. If I see you carrying a pepper spray with you again, I'll kick you out, Lila Gavich scolded. Boss, you didn't fire me? Merlin asked in surprise. With her experience, it was not difficult for her to find another high-paying job. However, she still had a dozen subordinates waiting for her to pay them. It was really hard to find a boss as generous as Lila Genovich. If possible, she did not want to lose her job. Fired? You haven't compensated me for my medical expenses and mental damage. Also, if I hear anything about me harassing you, you better be careful. Lila Genovich was also subtly warning Merlin about what he should and shouldn't say. Merlin was a smart person. He obviously knew that Lila Genovich was warning him to be careful. Merlin knew that what he had seen was not normal, whether it was the underground lab or the terrifying power Chen Zhao had displayed earlier. Just as the three of them walked in front of the elevator, they heard a ding sound and the elevator door opened. They saw Chen Zhao standing in the elevator, covered in blood. Merlin and the researcher were terrified. They stood there, not knowing what to do. Are you going to wait for the next one? Chen Zhao asked. Merlin and the researcher hurriedly entered the elevator. Lila Genovich was much calmer. He did not even find it strange. What was strange about it? What kind of scene was this? You killed them all? Lila Genovich asked. Yes. Chen Zhao didn't just walk around the entire underground lab. He also spread the dark lava out. Every nook and cranny was cleaned. He didn't even let go of the pipe connecting the toilet bowl. This thing was too big of a scourge. Not a single one was spared. If it was a regular demon, no matter how strong it was, Chen Zhao wouldn't have mobilized so many people. However, if the feathered serpent god wasn't careful, the entire human race would be overturned. Therefore, it was better to be cautious. After returning to the surface, the researcher wanted to borrow Chen Zhao and Lila Gavich's phone. Chen Zhao and Lila Gavich sneered at the researcher. I still don't know your name. Chen Zhao put his hand on the researcher's shoulder. The researcher looked at Chen Zhao. Sir, I don't think I need to, crack. Everyone heard the sound of Chen Zhao crushing the researcher's shoulder. When Chen Zhao let go of the researcher, he was already rolling on the ground, clutching his shoulder in pain. Chen Zhao squatted down and smiled at the researcher. Maybe you don't know me, but I'd like to introduce myself. When someone goes against my will or rejects my request, I'll be very unhappy, very, very unhappy. And every time I get emotional, I'll kill people to calm myself down. Killing is illegal, the researcher said in pain. I have an excellent team of lawyers. They can answer any of my legal questions, so I don't need you to explain to me. Merlin turned his head, indicating that he hadn't seen anything. Chen Zhao didn't say something. Killing might be illegal, but it wouldn't be if there was no evidence left. I'm Krabby Iyer. Okay, Mr. Krabby. This is the beginning of our friendship. Who the hell has a friendship with you? Krabby Iyer thought to himself. Do you know where the lab moved to? Chen Zhao asked. I don't know. Chen Zhao narrowed his eyes at Krabby Iyer. Your answer made me like you even less. I really don't know, really, Krabby Iyer said hurriedly. He was afraid that Chen Zhao would attack him again. He hadn't eaten for 2 days, and his limbs were weak. If Chen Zhao hit him a few more times, he would probably lose his life. He didn't think that he could take a few punches from Chen Zhao. Chen Zhao had killed a mature, feathered serpent god with one kick. Chen Zhao stared at Krabby Iyer again. Krabby Iyer repeatedly promised that he really didn't know. Chen, I'll repurpose this land, Lila Gavich said. It's best not to bury people around here, or else I'll be in trouble. 10 kilometers to the north. Even if I want to bury people, I'll bury them there. Krabby Iyer trembled in fear. Don't kill me. To me, worthless people don't need to live. I got it. Krabby Iyer said hurriedly. Got it. I don't know where the lab is, but I know the company that moved it to. It's Antac Cargo, Krabby Iyer said hurriedly. Krabby Iyer hurriedly said, at that time the person in charge of discussing the details of the move was in contact with someone from Anita Cargo Company, and I happen to know that person. We even talked for a while afterwards, so Anita Cargo Company definitely knows where to move the laboratory. Chen Zhao and Lila Gavich didn't expect to get such important information from Krabby Iyer. If they could find the lab directly, it would save them the trouble of spying on Homesia's family. I hope you're not lying to me, Chen Zhao said calmly. No, I don't dare. But before we find it, you can't go anywhere. You want to detain me? That's illegal detention. Chen Zhao glanced at Krabi Iyer. Please don't repeat such stupid words in front of me. Krabi Iyer didn't speak. After all, Chen Zhao could even talk about murder so casually. Why would he care about illegal detention? Gavich, we need to clean the place again. Find someone reliable. Chen Zhao meant that they should find people from the Dark Elves, not ordinary people. Chapter 24:19. Chen Zhao had already cleaned up the bottom, but there were still many unspeakable scenes. Krabi was a regular person. Chen Zhao didn't plan to bring him with him, but Lila Gavich had a solution. Before coming to the New Society Research Institute, Chen Zhao had already arranged for people to monitor Homesia's family. When he got home, Fei Lai was still reading the Huasha classics. Darling. Chen Zhao greeted them and sat down beside Fei Lai. He took her right hand and carefully removed the gauze. Fei Lai didn't respond. She just changed her posture and hugged Chen Zhao. Fei Lai's wound had already healed, but there were still some marks. How do you feel today? A little weak, Fei Lai answered. I can't focus. This was the most obvious symptom of losing vitality, but Chen Zhao hadn't made a potion to replenish vitality yet. So, he didn't have a good solution for now. Of course, Fei Lai's body and vitality were much stronger than regular people's. So, Fei Lai could be considered healthy now. Her weakness was mostly because she wasn't used to it. Have you found the mastermind behind this incident? Not yet. Be faster, Fei Lai said gently. Angel Shore has already been sealed. I want to be faster too, but the mastermind is very cautious. The clues we can find are also very limited. Then work harder. You're protecting world peace. Fei Lai still felt that, apart from being the president of the supernatural organization, Chen Zhao was also a member of a secret organization that protected world peace, because that was what Chen Zhao had said at the beginning. Even now, she still firmly believed this. Chen Zhao would occasionally disappear for a day, and he never told her where he went. Papa! Papa! Just then, little Jerlin ran in, followed by little Larissa, who stumbled behind. Papa, look what I caught. Seeing what Jerlin was holding, Chen Zhao was scared out of his wits. Oh my! Chen Zhao quickly snatched the octopus from Jerlin. It was a mutant octopus, but when Chen Zhao grabbed it, he realized that it was already dead. Had the mutant octopus already spread to Mirror Lake? Frowning, Chen Zhao went to Mirror Lake. Dark magma was released instantly. Chen Zhao realized that there were only 2 or 3 mutated octopuses in Mirror Lake, and they were almost dead. This was probably because this was an upper-class water source and it was fresh water. These octopuses were originally from the sea. No matter how much they mutated, it was impossible for them to survive in fresh water. Chen Zhao really thought that the octopuses had mutated to the point where they could leave the water. Chen Zhao had almost pissed his pants. Fortunately, it was just a false alarm. Just then, Chen Zhao received Isaac's call. Mr. Chen, I've researched something about the mutated octopus. Any new discoveries? It's a bit complicated. Can you come over? The Marine Biology Research Institute? No, my house. Chen Zhao was surprised, but he didn't ask. When they found Isaac's house, they found that it was just an ordinary 2-story house. It covered an area of less than 150 square meters. For the people of the United States, this was quite small. Moreover, more than half of it was made up of courtyards and turf. The real construction area was less than 100 square meters. Ding dong! The one who opened the door was a beautiful young woman. She first glanced at the car parked outside the fence, and then at Chen Zhao's clothes. Hi, what's up? Chen Zhao was a bit wary of the woman. Perhaps it was because the security in their community was not very good. Thus, when she opened the door, she only left a small gap. Hi, madam. I'm here to see Isaac. Hi. You and Isaac are... I think I'm his new boss, Chen Zhao said, smiling. Oh, Isaac's in the garage. No, in the lab. Okay, thank you. May I know who you and Isaac are? I'm Isaac's wife, Salina. Chun Zhao could feel that Salina and Isaac were the same type of person. After learning his identity, Salina's attitude clearly changed. Of course, Chun Zhao didn't dislike people like her. Everyone pursued profit. It wasn't a big deal. Actually, Salina and Isaac had similar personalities. They both wanted to live a glamorous life. Salina had married Isaac in the first place. It was mostly because Salina felt that Isaac's future was predictable. However, Isaac's career didn't rise as Salina had expected. For several years, there had been no waves, neither rising nor falling. Isaac's income was also far from enough for the family to do whatever they wanted. This caused the couple's relationship to weaken day by day. Salina definitely didn't want a life where she had to worry about daily necessities. She wanted to be able to go to all kinds of high-end clubs and choose the luxury she liked. She didn't want to drool at those things in commercials. She didn't want to fool people with fakes and get recognized at parties. Because of this, Salina even thought about divorce. But 2 days ago, Salina saw Isaac come back in the middle of the night. She wanted to have a big fight with him, but Itzhak told her that he had a new job and that his new boss was a very generous man. Salina didn't really believe it. She felt that even if Isaac changed jobs and got a higher salary, it would still be hard for him to reach her expectations. But when she saw Chun Zhao's car today, her expectations were slightly raised. She didn't own his sports car, but at least she knew that the car was expensive. It might be something that the couple couldn't reach, even if they worked hard for a lifetime. Salina brought Chun Zhao to the lab. Chun Zhao saw the sliding door. It was clearly a garage for both parking and experiments. Itzhak, your boss is here to see you. Isaac turned around and saw Chun Zhao standing outside. Mr. Chen, you're here. Chun Zhao looked around and said in disappointment, I need a professional researcher, not an amateur. I need a professional researcher, not an amateur. In this kind of environment, it would be very difficult for a researcher to publish a paper, even if it was the most accurate data, to achieve results or to gain attention. Hearing Chun Zhao's words, Isaac's heart started pounding. How much do you need to invest to build a research institute like the Marine Biology Research Institute? Chapter 2420. Salina saw Chun Zhao write down the number that Isaac had given her on the check without hesitation. She was immediately sure that Isaac's new boss was indeed generous with his money. Very generous. He was so extravagant that she wanted to devote herself to him. Not to mention Salina. Even Itzhak wanted to devote himself to her. Of course, even without any contract, Isaac wouldn't dare to stuff the money into his own pocket. Even without using Chun Zhao's own power, Chun Zhao's legal team alone was enough to make Isaac spend the rest of his life picking soap in prison. Mr. Chin. Boss, which direction do you need me to research? Isaac wasn't a pure researcher. He knew that Chun Zhao didn't need to benefit the world, but to turn their research results into returns. Build a team for me in the early stages. I don't need you guys to research anything valuable, but you have to speak up for me when I need it. Itzhak roughly understood what Chun Zhao meant. What Chun Zhao needed was someone who could speak up for him in his field of expertise. He could make no contributions, but he couldn't make mistakes. Of course, it would be best if he could create value for Chun Zhao. Salina, can you help me prepare dinner for boss and me? Isaac looked at his wife. Of course, Salina said considerately. My pleasure. After Salina left, Chun Zhao asked, how long will it take to build your team? It depends on what kind of research team you need. If it's someone like my teacher Nancy, it'll probably take at least a year. I don't need someone like Nancy. I need someone you can completely control. Of course, I also need someone I can control, someone with professional abilities and ideals. If that's the case, it shouldn't be hard. 1 month is enough. Okay, I'll give you 1 month. Also, Do you need any professional equipment? 1 scientific research ship and 1 deep-sea submarine. These 2 are the most important and also the most expensive. Boss, I'm afraid the money you gave me, how much? Research ships and deep-sea submarines also have different prices. The best. Also, it's best if it's available on the market. I don't want to have to order scientific research ships and deep-sea submarines. Qin Zhao was an impatient person. What he needed was someone who could endorse him, not a team with scientific spirit. I think it should be within $30 million. When you have time, go and take a look at these manufacturers and give me a quote. I will send someone to buy them. He didn't have to buy the equipment himself. After all, the price was too high, even if he was confident that Isaac would not dare to be greedy. But if Isaac was really hot-headed, it would be troublesome to clean up. Chen Zhao could casually give him a huge check. Although it was a lot of money, it was not enough for Isaac to give up everything for it. But when money reached a certain level, that might not be the case. Tell me about your recent research on mutated octopuses. What did you find? Boss, I've dissected more than a dozen mutated octopuses. I've discovered that these mutated octopuses only have a lifespan of about 15 days. Many of their organs haven't fully grown, but their bodies have already matured. This causes many of their functions to be uncoordinated, which is why their lifespan is very short. Their entire lives are spent eating and dying. All kinds of research have shown that this isn't a mature, mutated specimen. It's more like it was created for some purpose. To cause trouble, Chen Zhao said. Yes, that's right. It was created to cause trouble, Isaac said. There are a few main types of marine biology research. One is to obtain medical enlightenment or discovery through studying marine organisms. Another is to obtain data on breeding and breeding to create economic benefits. Another is to record the habits, evolution, and evolutionary history of marine organisms. Of course, there are also some research with the intention of protecting the environment. But generally, these are the main purposes of marine biology research. This mutated octopus is definitely man-made. Secondly, I can't think of any other use for this mutated octopus other than causing trouble. This mutated octopus has a short life cycle and abnormal brain development. Its intelligence is much lower than that of normal octopuses. They rely more on instinct to eat and hunt. When they're larvae, they'll attach themselves to medium and large fish and eat the parasites or plankton on them. Then, when they're bigger, they'll eat the host's body to obtain enough nutrients for growth. A 1-kilogram fish is probably enough for their short life, but they'll leave the host after their outer body matures. Then, they'll start looking for more suitable food. Isaac paused and said, I threw a few mice into the tank where the mutant octopuses were kept. At the same time, I also threw in some small fish. Except for one octopus that was easily bitten to death by the mice, most of the mutant octopuses chose mice as their first target. They seemed to have a special liking for mammals. This made me suspect that the original purpose of the person who designed and created them was to attack humans. Also, I discovered a special characteristic of these mutated octopuses. What characteristic? Backtrack. What's backtrack? Do you know about salmon? They'll pass through many obstacles and return to their birthplace to lay eggs. Then they'll return to the sea to grow. This cycle repeats itself. These octopuses seem to have this characteristic too. I discovered it by accident. After one escaped from the tank, it kept crawling in one direction in a straight line. When I discovered this mutated octopus, I suddenly had this idea. Then I experimented with other mutated octopuses and discovered that some of them have the ability to backtrack. Some. So not all? Actually, not all of them. It mainly depends on whether they've eaten completely. According to my calculations, after they killed 5 mice and gnawed on part of their bodies, they're almost done eating. After that, they'll try everything they can to escape from the water tank and head in one direction. Chapter 24-21. Isaac's research was quite thorough. However, There was one thing he hadn't figured out, which Chen Zhao knew. The mutated octopuses weren't eating normal food. They were sucking life force. Are there any dead rats? Chen Zhao asked. Yes. Although Isaac's temporary lab wasn't big, it had a lot of equipment. But because the area was small, many things were very messy. Once he stopped, some equipment had to be moved again. Of course, this wasn't because Isaac had a scientific spirit. He was just trying to prove his own value. Chen Zhao never disliked people like him. In fact, he quite admired him. After all, things that were biased towards interests could change. However, people like Isaac who thought that he was trying to prove his value wouldn't change. Perhaps he was powerful and greedy, but that didn't mean he was a bad person. At least up until now, Isaac hadn't used his knowledge to harm others. As long as Chen Zhao had a question, Isaac would answer it. At least in his field of expertise, he could give Chen Zhao almost all answers. Oh, if they attach themselves to a large mammal, such as a whale, is it possible for an ant to shake an elephant? Impossible, Isaac said, chuckling. Every creature has a growth limit. Even if they have the ability, they can't penetrate the whale's skin. The whale's skin is very thick. Even small bullets can't penetrate it, let alone octopuses. Also, these mutated octopuses are very weak. Before they finish eating, they rely on the ocean currents to get close to the LA coastline. Even if they attach themselves to whales, they won't be able to attach themselves for long with whale speed. They'll be shaken off at any time. Based on these points, we can rule out this possibility. A while later, Selina came into the lab. Isaac, Mr. Chen, I prepared some food. Let's go and eat together. Chen Zhao didn't decline. Selina prepared some barbecue and beer. However, because Chen Zhao had to drive, he only ordered a few cans of drinks. Boss, have you thought about aquaculture? Never. What's the profit from aquaculture? Chen Zhao asked. It depends on the scale, the type of aquaculture, and the sales channel. Give me an accurate figure. If I buy a 20 square kilometer sea area for aquaculture, how much profit can I make in a year? If it's a mollusk bivalve, it can probably exceed $20 million a year. If it's other fish, because of the huge difference in type and price, the income is also different. Also, due to the impact of the ocean climate change, the data changes are also very big. Hearing the 20 million profit, Chen Zhao lost interest. Not to mention the complexity of mariculture. Mariculture and tourism were essentially in conflict. Chen Zhao couldn't set up a farm near Nanchi Island either. Chen Zhao planned to build a complete resort on Nanchi Island and the surrounding waters. They took over almost all the entertainment programs. In Isaac and Selina's opinion, an annual profit of tens of millions of dollars should be considered high. He wanted to show his value, which was why he wanted to encourage Chen Zhao. How does an employee demonstrate his value? Of course, it was to help the boss earn money. However, Chen Zhao didn't care about the profits at all. On the way home, he received a call from Andrews. Hello, Mr. Chin. Hello, Andrews. How have you been? Thank you for your concern. I'm great. Andrews was indeed great. After all, as Chen Zhao's business manager, he was responsible for helping Chen Zhao with some investments. Plus, Chen Zhao had a terrifying amount of cash, so he had a very high status in the banking department. Of course, he would get a commission for every cent he helped Chen Zhao earn. Chen Zhao only wanted one thing from him: short-term, stable, and safe. He didn't need to rely on the cash to make money. It was fine as long as he didn't lose money. He didn't earn much for Chen Zhao. It was basically the same as the depreciation of the currency. However, Chen Zhao still gave him a 5% share. Andrews actually had a risk-taking gene in his bones. After all, almost everyone in the financial industry would take risks. However, he really didn't dare to go against Chen Zhao's wishes. This was because every investment he made required Chen Zhao's approval first. If he dared to invest in some high-risk projects, Chen Zhao would directly cancel his financial services. Many people in the business department had their eyes on Chen Zhao's big cake. Some people even used other methods to get Chen Zhao's phone number, saying that they could give Chen Zhao more benefits. In the end, Chen Zhao was annoyed by the harassment and went to complain to Andrews. Only then did Andrews know about it. However, Andrews was quite satisfied with his current income. He helped Chen Zhao manage the billions of dollars in cash, even though they were all ordinary projects. However, because of the huge amount of cash, he could easily pull the profits of the projects and bring a greater return to the money. Ever since he became Chen Zhao's financial manager, he had helped Chen Zhao earn at least $50 million. He also received a share of more than $2 million. In the past, he would help other clients with financial investments. Although the return was higher, other clients couldn't compare to Chen Zhao. A few $100,000 or even $1 million was already a big client. Even if the return was 10%, the share he could get was pitifully small. There was also a ladder share. He wasn't like Chen Zhao, who would give him a 5% share no matter how much money he made. Thus, until now, he hadn't made an investment that caused Chen Zhao to lose money. As for the other people in the business department, they had dozens or even hundreds of clients. Even if they made high-risk investments, they might not make as much as him. Moreover, it was much easier because he only had to take care of Chen Zhao. Thus, he would always visit Chen Zhao first during the holidays. Also, Andrews knew when to stop. Every time he called or visited Chen Zhao, it was always at the right time. He wouldn't let Chen Zhao feel like his life was interrupted. "Mr. Chen, Miss Amira said that she wants to meet you. When are you free?" "I might be busy these days," Chen Zhao said. "If possible, it'd be the weekend." "Never mind, I'll contact Amira later." Chapter 24-22. Because the mutant octopus incident hadn't been resolved. Chen Zhao was so busy that he couldn't care less. He couldn't help it. This was really troublesome, and the influence was only on the surface. Even if Chen Zhao wasn't the president of the supernatural organization, he would still be affected. No matter how he looked at it, it was a supernatural incident. And if it was caused by someone from the supernatural world, it wouldn't just affect a single person. It might affect all the spiritualists in the area. For example, if a wolf bit a person to death, with the way the human government dealt with it, it was very likely that all the wolves in the area would be killed. The supernatural world wouldn't use such drastic measures, but there would definitely be influence. Just like the saying went, if the sky collapsed, the tall one would hold it up. Right now, Chen Zhao was that tall one. So, Chen Zhao could only postpone Amira's invitation. In a community in Los Angeles. "Homesius, our house seems to be under surveillance." Adele dialed her husband's phone number. She knew what her husband's occupation was. She didn't care what her husband did. What she cared about was the safety of her family, and she was a retired female soldier. She couldn't say that she was very elite, but at least she knew some investigative and anti-investigative methods. She also realized that the people watching her were very unprofessional. They couldn't even compare to ordinary police. The people watching her house were a man and a woman, both very young, and their car was parked across the road from her house. They didn't even roll up the windows. Usually, police surveillance would be done in vans or SUVs with a certain amount of space. Also, they wouldn't park their car across the road from the surveillance house. They wouldn't get out of the car either. Even if they needed to eat or go to the toilet, they would drive away with the car. But the man and woman watching her house weren't like this. They were monitoring him so blatantly. During lunch and dinner, they would get out of the car to buy things and then return to the car casually. Adele felt like her intelligence was insulted. Sometimes, when she went out to the supermarket to buy things, the young couple would blatantly follow her in their car. It only took Adele a day to determine the two young men in the car outside. "Police?" Homesius asked. "Not police," Adele answered. Adele replied, "I can't tell where they came from. They have no experience in surveillance at all, and they don't look like police officers. They look more like two big kids." This time, West had sent Belia and Morid to monitor them. The two of them really had no experience in surveillance. In fact, West wanted to send the Lightning team. In the entire supernatural organization, other than Gaia, who had military experience, the most professional was the Lightning Squad, led by cows. However, Klaus and the others had been out of the country during this period of time, and Distant Water could not put out a nearby fire. Gaia was even less suited for surveillance, because Gaia was too eye-catching. First of all, she had appeared in one of Steven's movies. Although she wasn't very popular, she still had a certain level of fame. Coupled with her eye-catching figure, it was hard not to be recognized. In the end, West could only send two relatively inconspicuous members to monitor them. They were Belia and Morid. Morid used to be a delinquent and had the air of a ruffian. Belia also changed her clothes slightly and put on smoky makeup. Standing beside Morid, they looked like a pair of punk-style delinquents. "Morid, I'm thirsty. Go buy a few drinks." Most supervisors prepared their own rations and tried to drink as little water as possible. That way, they could continue monitoring for a longer period of time. However, they didn't care that much. They didn't know these things at all. When they were hungry, they would get out to buy food. When they were thirsty, they would get out to buy drinks. Then they would go to the toilet frequently. Even during surveillance, one would lean against the window and stare at the opposite house, while the other would sit in the driver's seat and play with his phone. After a while, another person would continue monitoring. If Klaus and the others knew that Belia and Morid were monitoring them like this, they would probably take a submachine gun and shoot them. Morid returned with the drinks. Belia glanced at the drinks. "I don't like these." "It's good enough that you have drinks. We're monitoring them now." At that moment, Belia saw the door of the house opposite open, and Adele walked out. "Quick, get in the car. That woman is going out." Adele, who was driving, looked at the car behind her and felt a surge of anger. She didn't know who had sent these two to monitor her, but she felt that they were insulting her. Even if they were monitoring her, they should have at least sent two smart and skilled people. Sending two kids who couldn't even be considered amateurs to monitor her? What was going on? Adele wondered if she should lead them to some desolate place and bury them. But on second thought, that wasn't right. If she buried them now, it would be hard to deal with them if they sent two smart people over. Adele suppressed her plan to kill them and destroy their corpses. The first thing to do now was to figure out the power behind these two. She wanted to see what their goal was. Gradually, a plan formed in Adele's mind. At the same time, Adele sped up. The car behind her sped up as well. They followed behind without any intention of hiding. "Quick," Morid said confidently. "Did she notice us?" "Impossible," Morid said confidently. "Do you think this is a movie? She's just an ordinary woman. Even if we stand before her, she won't know what we're doing." Suddenly, Adele's car turned the steering wheel to the left. Oh no! Morid didn't realize that when Adele turned the steering wheel, there was another car in front of them. It was too late for them to turn or step on the steering wheel. Bang! They were rear-ended. Morid and Belia were both hit by the airbag, bleeding profusely. They could only hear noises and the siren of the ambulance. "Are you Chin Zhao?" "I am." "Who are you?" "Our hospital has received two injured people from a car accident. They gave you your contact number. They haven't paid for the treatment and hospitalization yet. Can you come over?" "Sure. Which hospital are you from?" "I'll go over now." Chin Zhao was confused. Who was in a car accident? She even gave him her contact number. Despite his confusion, Chin Zhao still rushed to the hospital. Chapter 24-23. Sorry. Chin Zhao looked at the woman he'd accidentally knocked over. He reached out like a gentleman and helped her up. "I should be the one sorry," Adele said, smiling. Chin Zhao nodded at her. He didn't care about who was right or wrong. Everyone came to the hospital because they were sick or their family or friends were sick. Everyone's time was precious. Therefore, he didn't have the time to argue over a small accident here. Chin Zhao walked around Adele and pushed open the door of the ward. Adele looked back at Chin Zhao, who'd just entered the room and then left expressionlessly. Chen Zhao didn't notice Adele's gaze. He was more concerned about Morid and Belia's injuries. Thankfully, when he entered the room, he saw that the two were fine. Morid's head was wrapped in gauze, and there were bruises around his eyes. Belia was slightly better. One of her hands was in a cast and hung on a frame. She couldn't get out of bed yet. "President," Belia called out in surprise when she saw Chen Zhao. Chen Zhao looked at the two in annoyance. "What's wrong with you two? How did you get into an accident?" "President, West arranged for us to monitor that woman," called Adele. "We drove a bit faster, so there was an accident," Morid said, feeling wronged. "You were driving very fast." "Not very fast. We can drive as fast as we can in the city, around 40 kilometers per hour. Fortunately, they'd been driving in the city. Even now, they still didn't understand that they'd been tricked by Adele. No matter how fast they drove in the city, they couldn't go very fast. If they'd been on a suburban road or a highway, perhaps Chen Zhao would see them in the morgue now. "Why did you give the hospital my contact number? Can't you contact West?" "Because it's embarrassing," Morid said shyly. Yes, it was embarrassing. Too embarrassing. Because West hadn't given them the surveillance mission. They'd fought for it. They'd watched too many secret agent movies and suddenly wanted to be a secret agent. At the time, West thought that it didn't matter who the mission was. He didn't think too much and just gave it to them. West didn't know that Morid and Belia had messed up the mission. Morid and Belia were also confused, so they didn't tell Chen Zhao in detail. As a result, Chen Zhao was confused and thought that it was really a normal traffic accident. President, there's one more thing." Morid looked at Chen Zhao awkwardly. Belia also lowered her head and stole a glance at Morid. "What is it? Say it. Can this car accident be considered a work injury? I've already paid for your medical fees, so you don't have to count it as a work injury. Plus, your salaries aren't low either, right? A few $1,000s is nothing to you two." He wasn't going to argue with them over a few $1,000s. Belia and Morid were the original members of the supernatural organization. They were also Chen Zhao's first supporters. Plus, their strength and teamwork meant a lot to Chen Zhao. Therefore, they were treated very well. A basic salary of $60,000 per month, plus some allowances and benefits. Even if they were thrown into Wall Street, they would still be considered high-income people. If it's not medical fees, what about the compensation for the car accident? "You're mainly responsible for this accident. The police came and issued an accident liability certificate. We are fully responsible." "Okay," Chen Zhao said. "Do you have their contact? I'll take care of the compensation." "He's injured too. He's in this hospital now. Is he badly injured?" No, Morid said hurriedly. At the same time, he took out a business card and handed it to Chen Zhao. "This is their lawyer's business card." "Got it." Chen Zhao took the card and left the ward. "Hello, are you Ms. Queely's lawyer, Terrence?" "Yes." "Who's this?" "Two of my employees hit Ms. Queely's car on the road today. I'd like to discuss compensation with you, or Ms. Queely." "Sure, you can choose a place." From the voice on the phone, Chen Zhao could feel that the other person wasn't very friendly. Of course, it wasn't incomprehensible. After all, Morid and Belia had hit the other person. How could he expect the other person to be nice? "I heard from my staff that Miss Quilly is in the same hospital as them. As their boss, I have the obligation to visit Miss Quilly. I wonder if I can apologize to Miss Quilly in person?" "Sure, 15th floor, room 1501. After deciding on the time and place, Chen Zhao went to a flower shop near the hospital and bought a bouquet of tulips. Chen Zhao knocked on the door of room 1501. "Come in." Chen Zhao pushed the door open and saw that the environment was much better than Morid and Belia's. It was also a single room. There were two women in the room. One of them was sitting on the bed with her head wrapped in gauze. "Hello, I'm Chen Zhao, the boss of the person who hit Ms. Queely." Chen Zhao looked at the woman on the bed. You must be Ms. Creeley. This is for you. Thank you. Creeley nodded. Terrence took the bouquet and placed it in a vase. She turned around and stared at Chen Zhao aggressively. Mr. Chin, I'm Ms. Creeley's lawyer, Terrence said. I want to know your opinion on this matter. Her tone sounded like she was interrogating Qin Zhao. Of course, Qin Zhao replied with a smile. As the one at fault, I'll compensate Ms. Creeley for her car repair, medical, and lost time. Of course, I'll also cover any expenses incurred in the process, such as lawyer fees. He didn't plan on rejecting any reasonable compensation, but he was rather displeased with Taryn's attitude. It was an accident. She didn't hurt Creeley on purpose. Moreover, he'd come to discuss compensation himself. But Tyrant continued to be overbearing. Are you sure you want to pay for your employees' compensation? Is there a problem? Qin Zhao glanced at Terrence, his eyes filled with disdain. This is the bill, Mr. Chen. Are you sure you want to pay for your employees' compensation? Terrence tossed a bill to Qin Zhao. When Qin Zhao saw the number on the bill, he felt a headache coming on. No wonder those two were looking for him. Because they'd crashed a sports car, the repair cost was $1. 35 million. Together with the miscellaneous expenses, it added up to nearly $8 million US. Chen Zhao took out his checkbook, wrote down $2 million and signed it. This should be enough. Seeing the number, Terrence was slightly surprised. Then she said, I also want acrophobic drivers to drive dangerously. Chen Zhao frowned and looked at the two women. Ms. Creeley, is this what you want too? Chapter 24:24. Creeley was a bit hesitant. Just then, Terrence answered first. I'm Creeley's lawyer. I'll be in charge of this. Chen Zhao glanced at Creeley and then at Terrence. It seems that only the police can file a lawsuit for dangerous driving. I'll urge the police to file a lawsuit. Ms. Terrence, Chen Zhao said unhappily. It's just a normal traffic accident. But your employees have already hurt my client. That's not hurt. It's an accident. The court will decide whether it's an accident or a dangerous injury. If it was his problem, Chen Zhao would have left long ago. But now, Morid and Belia had gotten into an accident while working for him. He couldn't just leave them be. Plus, he needed people. Chen Zhao turned to look at Creeley. Ms. Creeley, I apologize on behalf of my employees for the harm they've caused you. However, they didn't do it on purpose, so I hope you can be more tolerant towards them. As for other compensations, as long as they're reasonable and within my capabilities, I'm willing to pay for them. Chen Zhao's tone was sincere, and his attitude was very humble. Creeley lowered her head and thought for a moment. But when she met Terrence's gaze, she still took a deep breath. Terrence will be in charge of this. This time, Qin Zhao was really angry. He'd already given her enough face. Since she wouldn't listen to his kind advice, he could only turn against her. Doing this won't get you any benefits. Creeley is just exercising her authority. Fine, that's all I have to say, Qin Zhao said. If you really want to fight in court, I'll accompany you to the end. With that, Qin Zhao turned and left. After leaving the ward, Qin Zhao picked up his phone and called Alex. Alex, that's how it is. I understand. Leave it to me. Also, how much do you need me to do? At the very least, I can compensate. If you can make it so that I don't even have to pay, that's even better, Chen Zhao said calmly. Although he'd given the check, it could be voided with a call to the bank. Qin Zhao said that the check would only be valuable if it had value. Tyrns, isn't this a little too much? He didn't do it on purpose. Creeley, don't you understand? What you need right now is to attract attention. It has nothing to do with their compensation. The most important thing is to make this a hot topic. I'll contact the entertainment media and let them publicize this incident, Tyrese said. But this is indeed a very ordinary traffic accident. Whether it's a traffic accident or not is up to us to decide. Trust me, I can make this ordinary traffic accident not look so simple. Also, I've seen the two people at fault in the accident. They're definitely not good kids. Maybe they already have a lot of criminal records in the police station. Just then the door was pushed open. There was no knock. Tylen frowned. This was a high-class ward. She thought they were paramedics. Just as she was about to lose her temper, she saw that it wasn't a doctor or nurse who came in. The leader was a woman, and behind her was a large group of people. From this woman's temperament, Tylen could clearly sense a familiar aura. Traveling together, Tylen's expression darkened. There was a saying that could be used in any industry. Traveling together is always an enemy. In the lawyer industry, this was a well-known saying. Who are you? This is private space. Please leave immediately, Tylen said. She took out her phone and tried to call the hospital's security. In fact, she didn't even have the hospital's number. However, she had to maintain her posture. At the same time, she looked at Alex and the others with a threatening gaze. Who's Queely Julian? Alex clearly knew who Queely was, but she still looked at the two of them as if she didn't know them. In fact, before she came here, her team had already investigated the two of them thoroughly. I am. What can I do for you? Queely wasn't a lawyer. She had never seen such a scene before. She immediately flinched in fear. Alex looked at Queely. Are you Miss Queely? I'm Morid and Belia's lawyer. I'm now representing my client to file a lawsuit against you and the police who handled this accident. Dangerous driving, endangering public safety, violating justice, and intentionally causing an unfair punishment. What? You're their lawyers? What right do you have to sue me? I'm the victim. No. According to our investigation and evidence, we've found enough witnesses to prove that you're the main culprit in this accident because you were driving too slowly. The normal speed on the road at the time of the accident is 20 to 40 kilometers per hour. My client was driving at 40 kilometers per hour when the accident happened. You were driving too slowly, below 20 kilometers per hour. That's why my client made the wrong judgment. After the accident, you didn't explain the matter and purposely threatened the police. That's why the police issued an unfair verdict. Tylen's mouth was wide open. Queely's expression froze. She couldn't speak at all. Tylen had thought that she was already an elite in the legal field. But now, she realized that she was really too naive. Only after seeing a true elite did she understand what it meant to distort the truth. Moreover, the other party was unreasonable. You can't do this. Tylen also didn't know what to do. Alex looked at Tyrese and said with a mocking smile, No, I can't. Miss Tyrese, Miss Quinn, you'd better be prepared not to do anything for the next 3 years. You'll be very busy. You need to focus on this lawsuit, and you need to accept the identity of the defendant. Wait, we want to talk to Mr. Chin. Queely was the first to give in. She wasn't the one who took the initiative. Tylen was basically the one in charge. She wanted to create a topic to make her more famous in the entertainment industry. In the end, it backfired and completely angered the other party. I'm sorry, my client is Morid and Miss Belia. Because of their serious injuries, especially the severe impact to their brains, they're unconscious. We also found out that Miss Queely has been involved in many traffic accidents in the past 3 years. We'll suggest that the police reinvestigate the traffic accidents in the past and investigate this accident together to see if Miss Queely deliberately created danger. By the way, my boss is a very persistent person. He once spent $5 million in legal fees for a $200,000 lawsuit. Believe me, he wouldn't mind spending $10 million for the sake of his employees to achieve the desired result. Chapter 24-25. Alex's visit this time was purely to intimidate them. She wouldn't talk to them immediately. She'd investigated Taryn's qualifications. She'd graduated from law school less than a year ago. She was Quinn's manager and lawyer at the same time. In fact, this was very unprofessional. In Alex's law firm, there were also lawyers who worked as consultants or private lawyers for some celebrities. But when they were lawyers, they would never work as managers for celebrities. There was a conflict between the business and time of the two. Terrans was doing this purely unprofessional. In this era, it wasn't a compliment for the capable to do more work. It was professional to specialize in one's field. If Alex needed to direct public opinion, she would hire a professional company to do it. Combining the above points, it was obvious that Tyrese was a rookie. She could use her professional knowledge to fool laymen. For example, someone like Qin Zhao. Laymen knew that they couldn't kill people, but they didn't know that there were many situations in which people could be killed. Lawyers could list out the consequences and reasons for killing people. But compared to Terrans, Alex and her team were much more professional. Terrans only wanted to use the incident itself to create a topic for Quinn, but Alex planned to use it instead. Quinn's intention meant that she'd purposely caused the traffic accident. Once they went to court, Alex would directly create this topic in the mainstream media. In order to become famous, the female celebrity had purposely created a car accident, causing 2 people to be seriously injured and hospitalized. Of course, it wasn't necessary now. For one, they didn't have any deep hatred. It was just a threat. Moreover, it cost money to get on the news and by trending topics. A lot of money. Alex only needed to let these 2 kids understand who they were dealing with. Quinn and Terrans broke out in a cold sweat. Alex was directly interrupting their careers and even their lives. They'd had a good discussion at first, using the car accident to create a topic. But they didn't expect the other party to be so ruthless. She turned the tables on them. Then Alex left with her majestic team. Terrans and Quinn, who hadn't recovered from the shock, were left in the ward. They thought that the person responsible for the accident was very simple. Trying to create a topic because of the accident and creating a traffic accident for the sake of popularity. They were 2 different things. Tylen, what do you think we should do? I didn't want to cause trouble, but you just had to provoke that person. Tyrese was both angry and afraid. She did not expect that she, who had been winning just a moment ago, would be completely outmaneuvered the next moment. I'll think of something. Tyrese knew this was Queely's personality. Not bad, perhaps, but annoying. She didn't agree to it, but she didn't object either. If something went wrong, then the responsibility would all be on him. However, this matter was indeed her responsibility. She was so full of herself that she even neglected the other party's wealth. In this country, money meant everything. Terrans took a deep breath and walked out of the ward. He went downstairs to Morid and Belia's ward. She was here to admit her mistake and ask for forgiveness at the same time. It was embarrassing, but she was a lawyer. Moreover, she did not want to gamble with her career or even her entire life. Mr. Morid, Ms. Belia, hello, I remember you. Morid interrupted her. What's the matter? I'm not feeling well right now, especially after seeing you. Qin Zhao had already told him when he came. Morid and Belia did not know how Qin Zhao had fought with them, but they still trusted Qin Zhao. This was basically no problem for Qin Zhao. That was why they asked for Qin Zhao's help. It was just as they had guessed. The domineering Tyrese who had been here once before had actually come over to admit her mistake. Mr. Morid, Ms. Belia, what do you want to do to make your boss give up on suing Ms. Queely? In fact, this dispute was no longer about who won or lost after going to court. Because if it really went to court, the other party would definitely not fight the case honestly. Once they fell out, the other party would first slander Queely in the media. By then, whether the lawsuit was won or lost, Queely would lose. And if Queely's Hollywood career was interrupted because of this, then Terrans would also have to bear the blame. By then, Terrans wouldn't just lose her job. Because of her client, and even her boss's career would be interrupted. She wouldn't have any jobs in the future. So, no matter how embarrassing it was, she had to apologize and beg for the other party's forgiveness. We're not feeling well right now. We'll talk about this after our injuries are healed. Qin Zhao had told them not to go overboard, but he could still make things difficult for Terrans to vent his anger. Ms. Belia, are you interested in developing your career in Hollywood? Ms. Quealy has a lot of connections in Hollywood. To Terrans, everyone in L.A., regardless of man or woman, had the dream of becoming a star. Also, Belia didn't seem very old. She should be easy to fool. Perhaps Chen Zhao could use her to solve this crisis. Not interested. Belia rolled her eyes. What a joke. If she really wanted to find a role, Chen Zhao could arrange one for her. Was there a need to arrange one for a stranger? Taryn's expression froze. She couldn't even use the lines she had prepared. Ms. Belia, don't you want to think about it? This is a rare opportunity. Maybe one day you'll become a big star. Belia and Morid both rolled their eyes hard. Terrans could feel their gazes. They looked at her like she was an idiot. This made her very uncomfortable. You don't believe me? Ms. Quealy is a big star. Big star? You think you're a star just because you acted in an independent movie, and it's even the second female lead? Morid said impolitely. He'd heard of Quealy. His impression of Quealy was that she'd once sacrificed herself for art in that independent movie. He wasn't in the entertainment industry, but he still knew some common sense. The star Terrans was talking about was probably just a C-list actor. How could she call herself a star with this kind of status? Ms. Quealy has a new movie coming out soon. It's a mainstream commercial movie. Her previous independent movies are just training for her acting skills. Chapter 24-26. What conditions do you have? We need compensation, Morid said shamelessly. Compensation? How much? $1 million, and we'll let this go. We're the victims. You're the responsible party. Why should we pay? Tylands was about to go crazy. She had never seen such a shameless person with such a shameless request. We wanted to pay, but you didn't want it. Morid sneered at Tylands. Tylands suddenly did not know how to retort. In the end, it was all her own doing. The other party did not intend to make a big deal out of this. They wanted to keep the peace and discuss compensation, but she thought that she had the upper hand. Then the other party went crazy and planned to die together with her. Of course, this might not be considered dying together at all. It might be completely destroyed by the other party. Even if the other party lost the lawsuit, the two of them would at most have to issue an apology. The two of them were just nobodies. They could not recover Quealy's lost reputation. However, if Quill lost, it would be a disaster for her acting career. Judging from the current situation, they were more likely to lose. But we're the ones who suffered. Even if we don't include Miss Quealy's medical fees, her supercar needs to be repaired. It's not a small amount. At most, we won't ask for your compensation. You asked for it. It's your fault for offending our boss. Tylands calmed herself down. We can compensate, but $1 million is too much. 50,000 at most. Do you think we're beggars? If this is your sincerity, we'll see you in court. To be honest, Morid and Belia were not the kind of people who were calculative. Most of what they were going to say was prepared by Chen Zhao. In the end, they entered the bargaining stage, and finally, the two sides finalized a compensation of $300,000. Of course, Quealy would have to pay Morid and Belia $300,000. This number was also set by Alex. $300,000 was not a small amount. At least for a celebrity like Quill. $300,000 was an acceptable amount, but it was also a painful amount to spend. Of course, Alex did not want to fight this kind of lawsuit. Firstly, the chances of winning were not high. Secondly, it was expensive. Once they fell out, Chen Zhao would have to spend even more money to bribe the media to suppress them. This money was a waste. Moreover, there was no deep enmity between the two sides. Therefore, there was no need to fight to the death. Of course, Quealy and Terran still had to sign a contract. He expressed that he would not pursue the matter of the accident and would settle it through private negotiations. This was also the condition of the settlement between the two sides. After all, both sides were on guard against each other. When Tylan left, her mood was rather gloomy. This was the biggest mistake she had ever made in her career. On his way home, he received a call from Morid and Belia. Although this was not a big deal, it was not a small matter. However, it could be resolved peacefully in the end, and he didn't even need to pay. The final result was a happy one. Suddenly, Qin Zhao felt an unfamiliar gaze. Through the rearview mirror, he saw a car following him. However, Qin Zhao realized that there were 4 gangsters in the car following him. Qin Zhao stopped by the road outside Mountain Town. Then he got out of the car and waited for the car behind him to come. The car that was tailing him also stopped. 4 gangsters got out of the car. They were ordinary people, but they definitely did not know Qin Zhao. Holding a baseball bat, they walked toward Qin Zhao arrogantly. Qin Zhao strode forward, not giving them a chance to speak. He snatched the baseball bat from the gangster in front and swung his arm. The first gangster's jaw was smashed. Before the other 4 could say anything, Qin Zhao had already knocked them to the ground in a few moves. At the same time, he dragged the 4 of them into the cornfield nearby by their hair. Qin Zhao dragged them deep into the cornfield and casually threw them on the ground. He carried the baseball bat on his shoulder. "Tell me, who told you to come find me?" "Careful, Qin Zhao did not give him a chance to finish. The baseball bat drew a patch of blood. Crazy, the 4 wanted to run. But Qin Zhao continued with a flurry of bats, beating them until they curled up on the ground. One of them had already lost consciousness. Blood kept dripping from his forehead. He was the first to have his jaw smashed. The other 3 were covered in injuries too. They did not expect the person they were looking for to be so cruel. Qin Zhao picked another one and walked up to him. "Who told you to come?" "I don't know." "I don't know." Slap. Qin Zhao swung the bat again, hitting the gangster's shoulder. Qin Zhao picked the second one. "Who told you to come?" The gangster's face was filled with fear. He shook his head violently. "I don't know. I really don't know." Slap. Qin Zhao looked at the third gangster. "Someone gave me money, a woman. She told us to break your arms and legs. I don't know who she is." Qin Zhao frowned and swung the bat again. "I hate it when people interrupt my rhythm." Qin Zhao took out his phone and called David. "Hey, David, I was attacked." "For hoodlums. I'm injured." "Of course. I beat the 4 hoodlums before I got injured." "Yes, David." David. It was not the first time Qin Zhao had done this. Moreover, he would always ask for David's cooperation. Thus, David was already used to it. When David brought his men to the scene, he saw Qin Zhao standing there immaculately, but one of his arms was clearly dislocated. But when he saw the 4 heavily injured gangsters on the ground, David was even more certain of his guess. Qin Zhao's dislocation was clearly self-directed. Moreover, Qin Zhao was a doctor. He knew the body structure and how to dislocate himself better than anyone else. Ronson also came with David. He knew how terrifying Qin Zhao was even better than David. Thus, he stood at the side in silence. Just like David, he looked at Qin Zhao, who was almost unharmed, and the 4 gangsters who were covered in injuries. He knew what had happened. "Help me find out who they are," Qin Zhao said to David. "You beat them up like this, and you still need me to find out who they are." "That wasn't my intention. I was just defending myself." David couldn't help but roll his eyes. Defending himself? If it was a fully armed mercenary group, maybe you really needed to defend yourself. David thought to himself. At the same time, he asked, "You really don't know who they are?" Chapter 24-27. David sighed. "Make your injuries worse. You're not convincing at all. Also, I called an ambulance for you." "What? Why?" "You seriously injured 4 people, and you didn't even go to the hospital. Is that self-defense?" "Fine. Do I need to lie on the ground now?" "As long as you're happy." David couldn't be bothered with Qin Zhao anymore. Nevertheless, Qin Zhao still obediently lay down in the ambulance. Adele was in Mountain Town at the moment. She sat in a restaurant and watched the police cars and ambulances whizzing past. A smile appeared on Adele's face. She'd hired those gangsters to cause trouble for Chen Zhao. Adele left the restaurant and followed the ambulance. She followed them all the way to the hospital. Adele saw Chen Zhao being pushed out of the ambulance. Her smile became even more satisfied, although she didn't know Chen Zhao and didn't know who he was. However, Chen Zhao was the boss of the two outsiders who'd been watching her. He must have sent them. But Adele didn't do this just for revenge. She also wanted to find out from Chen Zhao what his goal was. "Darling, I probably won't be able to come home tonight." Chen Zhao called Fei Lai. I'm in the hospital now. I beat up those gangsters, but David told me to act more realistically. I'll pretend to be injured and stay in the hospital for the night. Then I'll get the hospital to write a certificate of serious injuries. I'll have Alex take it to the police tomorrow. Okay, I'll be careful next time. At least I won't hit so hard. Okay, rest well. As soon as Chen Zhao hung up, he saw a nurse push a cart in. "Sir, it's time to take medicine." "Medicine?" Chen Zhao was stunned. He hadn't agreed to take medicine. He hadn't even been diagnosed. "What medicine?" "I don't know, but the police and doctor outside said that your arm has a soft tissue injury. They'll need to put a cast on you later." Hearing this, Chen Zhao's face darkened. The first person he thought of was David. David had tricked him on purpose. "I don't need medicine." The nurse had already prepared a syringe. She drew a bottle of medicine and glanced at Chen Zhao. "If you don't need medicine, you can tell the doctor." "What medicine is it?" Chen Zhao asked. "I don't know. Ask the doctor yourself." Chen Zhao picked up the empty bottle from the cart and looked. "Is this anesthetic?" "The doctor prescribed it for you." "I don't know. Give me your arm." The nurse grabbed Chen Zhao's wrist and was about to pry his sleeve open. "Wait, rub it with alcohol first. A grown man doesn't need to go through so much trouble." Damn, this nurse must be a newbie. Alcohol was used to soothe the condition of the skin and also to make the veins clearer. It also had a certain analgesic effect. Moreover, his skin was rough and his flesh was thick. If the needle pierced through, it would definitely break. "Forget it. I'll do it myself." Chen Zhao was about to get some alcohol. However, the nurse continued to push the needle downwards. Chen Zhao immediately grabbed the needle. The nurse didn't care too much. She felt some resistance in her hand, so she pushed harder. She was sure that the needle had stabbed into Chen Zhao's palm. "Who are you?" Chen Zhao frowned at the nurse. At this time, she stopped pretending and pulled down her mask. "You are." Chen Zhao found the nurse familiar, but he wasn't sure if he really knew her. The nurse was Adele in disguise. Adele had a mocking expression on her face. She directly lifted the blanket covering Chen Zhao. "What are you doing?" "I'm taking you to an interesting place, of course." With that, Adele reached out and dragged Chen Zhao off the bed. Then she placed him on the wheelchair beside her. "Fuck, why are you so heavy?" Adele finally moved Chen Zhao onto the wheelchair and then started pushing him out. At the same time, Chen Zhao felt something sharp poking his back. "You better not make any noise. Otherwise, you might get hurt." "Fine, I promise I won't scream." Actually, Adele was quite worried. If Chen Zhao really screamed in the hospital, she wasn't confident that she could escape. After all, there were still police outside. The anesthetic she'd prepared for Chen Zhao was very strong, but she didn't understand why Chen Zhao could still make a sound. Perhaps the effects weren't there yet. Thankfully, Chen Zhao didn't plan on crying for help at all. "Put the knife down. It's uncomfortable to keep poking it. You don't have to keep the knife in your hand. With your speed, you can kill me in a very short time. Plus, I value my life very much. I won't cry for help." Adele clearly didn't believe Chen Zhao. She still poked Chen Zhao's back with the knife and pushed the wheelchair forward. When they reached the parking lot, Adele wanted to shove Qin Zhao into the trunk again. If you shove me into the trunk, I'll keep screaming. A fierce glint flashed across Adele's eyes. Are you threatening me? Look at how cooperative I am. Am I not trustworthy? Smiling, Qin Zhao looked at Adele. I can do whatever you want, but don't shove me into the trunk. I don't like it there. You don't have a choice now. No, I do. Smiling, Qin Zhao looked at Adele. As long as you haven't completely escaped, I do. Humph. Adele was very unhappy with Qin Zhao's attitude. However, she still didn't want to attract too much attention here. Thus, she still decided to put Qin Zhao in the passenger seat. Just like Qin Zhao said, he was very obedient. So obedient that it was as if he was Adele's old friend. After the car started, Qin Zhao asked, Where are we going now? Not us, me. It's the same. Wherever you go, you'll take me. You can't just leave me behind, right? That's possible. Adele glanced at Qin Zhao. Are you imagining that someone will come and save you? I can save myself too. Then, how do you plan to save yourself? For example, money. I have money, a lot of money, Qin Zhao said. Huh, you think I kidnapped you for money? Maybe your original intention wasn't money, but if you have enough money, you might as well change your mind. Adele found Qin Zhao funny, very funny. He was actually using such a stupid method to survive. In a regular kidnapping case, once the kidnapper's request was satisfied, the first thing they would consider was not keeping their promise. Their first concern was not to keep their promise, but to get rid of all evidence. And the biggest evidence was the hostage itself. How much money can you give me? 9 Heavens, Divine Emperor. Chapter 24-28. How much do you think I'm worth? Qin Zhao asked in return. To me, you're worthless, Adele said. How can you be emotional about a kidnapper? You're very unprofessional. Adele was so angry that she laughed. Did this guy really think that she'd kidnapped him for money? Did he really think that she'd let him go for some money? From now on, you'll answer every question I ask. Ask away, Qin Zhao answered quickly. I'll tell you everything I know. Why did you send people to spy on me? Qin Zhao's eyes twitched. Spy on her? He didn't even know who she was. Oh, was she Homesius's wife? Qin Zhao didn't react at first. Then he realized that the woman was Homesius's wife. Also, from how she'd kidnapped him out of the hospital. She was probably very good at reconnaissance and anti-reconnaissance. Then, it wasn't that surprising that Morid and Belia had been discovered. Qin Zhao frowned. Did you cause the car accident of my 2 subordinates? What? You admit that you sent people to spy on me. Huh. There's nothing to be embarrassed about. I did it. You still haven't answered my question. Why did you send people to spy on me? One day I saw you on the street and fell in love at first sight. I wanted your contact number, but was too embarrassed to ask for it directly, so I sent people to spy on you, Qin Zhao lied. Although Adele was said to be so, it did make her heart burst with joy. However, she was still aware of her own limitations. She definitely wasn't a beauty in the public sense. Also, after a few years of marriage, her figure was already out of shape. A rich man might fall in love with a woman at first sight, but it definitely wouldn't be her. Moreover, when she disguised herself as a nurse and pulled down her mask, Qin Zhao's eyes clearly didn't recognize her. You better not play tricks, or I'll make you regret it, Adele said coldly. Adele said coldly, and you even used 2 idiots to monitor me. This is simply an insult to me. Actually, you don't know my good intentions. I just know that they're stupid. Yes, they're indeed stupid. That's why I used them. I just wanted you to find out. Humph. Adele was not an innocent girl. She didn't believe a single word Qin Zhao said. If the 2 people sent to watch her were idiots, it could be understood that Qin Zhao didn't have many people. Or rather, he was not the type of person to do such a thing. He was a layman to begin with, so he could only find laymen. However, this didn't explain why Qin Zhao was watching her. You don't have to say it now. I have ways to make you talk. Then I'll wait and see. I want to see how long you can be so stubborn. Adele didn't bring him home. Instead, she brought him to an abandoned factory. Right now, Chun Zhao was tied to a metal pillar. He looked at Adele, who was trying her best to tie him up. Did you bring me to a place like this to play some thrilling game with me? Humph. Adele snorted coldly and grabbed a rusty iron rod. Maybe now is the best time for you to speak. Otherwise, I can't guarantee what kind of pain you'll suffer. I already said that I fell in love with you at first sight. Are you going to treat your admirer like this? Adele suddenly lifted the metal rod and swung it at Chun Zhao's arm. Ah! Chun Zhao screamed. Sir, can you speak now? I already said that I fell in love with you at first sight. Adele got angry and hit Chun Zhao with the stick again. Chun Zhao cried out in pain. At the same time, she pushed the rod against Chun Zhao's chin. You still don't want to say it? I already said it. What else do you want? If that's the case, it means that you're not scared enough. Adele stared at Chun Zhao fiercely. Maybe I won't hit your arm this time. Chun Zhao suddenly grinned. Actually, there's one more thing I didn't tell you. What is it? Adele thought that Chun Zhao was going to confess. Actually, I have masochistic tendencies, Chun Zhao said. I'm a severe masochist. Adele's expression turned cold. She suddenly raised the rod and swung it at Chun Zhao's head. Bang! The rod broke and flew out, but Chun Zhao only tilted his head slightly. But he still had a smile on his face. I haven't felt so good in a long time. Adele narrowed her eyes at Chun Zhao. She didn't know if Chun Zhao really had masochistic tendencies, but Chun Zhao still maintained a smile despite this level of attack. At least it meant that he wasn't afraid of the torture. No, Adele raised an eyebrow. It wasn't that he wasn't afraid of pain. He didn't feel any pain at all. Adele suddenly remembered that she'd injected him with a large dose of anesthesia. How could he feel any pain now? Adele thought of a good idea. You like being masochistic, right? Yes. Then I'll take you to a place that can satisfy your masochistic tendencies. Let's do it here. That's not up to you. Adele untied Chun Zhao and dragged him back to the car. Where are we going this time? To a place that can satisfy your needs, of course. Then I'll look forward to it. I hope it won't disappoint me. As Adele drove, she took out her phone. Homesius, it's me. Where are you now? I sent someone home just now, but you're not home. I'm heading toward you, Adele said. Also, I caught the person who was watching me. Before we come over, let's search his body to see if he has a tracker. Got it. Oh, why did you send someone to find me? LA isn't safe anymore. The investor wants me and the equipment to move out. I sent someone to pick you up. Didn't we just teleport? Yes, but the investor is still worried. Adele was silent for a while. Then she said, Homesius, your investor isn't a good person. You better be careful. Adele had met the man who had invested in Homesius once. The first impression the investor gave was that he was young, handsome, rich, and had a good temper. But for some reason, Adele just couldn't have a good impression of the investor. I know, but the data is in my head, and the researchers under him were all recruited by me. Unless he plans to waste the research data of the past few years, he can't do anything to me. That's for the best. Adele didn't care what forbidden experiments her husband was researching. She only cared about her husband himself. Chapter 24-29. Chun Zhao realized that Adele had driven the car to the beach. She didn't take the coastal road either. Instead, she drove directly into the gravel beach. The bumpy ride made Chun Zhao very uncomfortable. They drove for more than an hour. It was already nighttime. The sky was dark and there was no starlight. Chun Zhao couldn't see anything outside. He could only hear the sound of waves rising and falling. Finally, Adele stopped the car. Adele dragged Chun Zhao out. You're not trying to drown me, are you? Chen Zhao's voice was filled with panic. What? Are you scared? I'm a masochist, but I don't want to die either. That's not up to you. Adele sneered. But Adele didn't plan to drown Chen Zhao. There was an old speedboat docked by the shore. People who didn't know better would definitely think that it was abandoned. In reality, the speedboat only looked old on the surface. Most of its normal functions could be used. At least it wouldn't capsize at sea. Adele tossed Chen Zhao onto the speedboat and started it. You left your car by the beach? Are you sure someone won't steal it? You shouldn't be worried about my car right now. I can't help it. I admire you. If you get hurt because of this, I'll feel bad. How about I buy you a new car later? Ha! I hope you still have the courage to say that when you see my husband later. Are you married? I didn't even know. Chen Zhao's face was filled with regret. After traveling on the sea for about 40 minutes, a very large cruise ship appeared in front of the speedboat. Chen Zhao looked at the ship and couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. Adele drove the speedboat to slow down and approach the luxurious cruise ship. After reaching the side of the ship, a ladder was thrown down on the deck. Chen Zhao was directly tied up and lifted onto the deck. Homesius stood on the deck and looked at Chen Zhao on the ground. He's the one who's watching you? Yes, it's him. Homesius looked at Chen Zhao. Who are you? You don't know me, but I know you. You're my rival in love. Homesius froze for a moment and looked up at Adele. Adele slapped her forehead. I can't do anything to him. No matter what I ask, he won't open his mouth. And he always uses this kind of thing to fool me. So I brought him to you. Do you have a way? Didn't we agree that you would bring me here and let me kill your husband? Then his assets would be transferred to your name so that we could be together forever. Adele sighed and Homesius was speechless. Of course, he couldn't believe such words. However, he was rather angry at Chen Zhao. He dared to tease his wife in front of him. Did this guy think he was dead? Brat, I will make you wish you were dead. I hope you won't disappoint me. Chen Zhao shrugged. Hormetheus waved his hand and had his two subordinates drag Chen Zhao up. Don't let him die too easily. Adele had suffered quite a bit from Chen Zhao along the way. Adele followed behind, and it was her first time at Homesius' new office. She had to admit that Homesius' investor was really rich. Such a huge cruise ship had actually been modified into a laboratory. The cost of this cruise ship was probably over $1 billion. This laboratory was even bigger and more luxurious than the previous one. Homesius, when are we leaving LA? The ship is heading for the international waters now, Homesius said. If we stay in the country, we might be discovered at any time. So the investor wants to take this cruise ship around the Pacific Ocean. First of all, we won't be investigated by any country on the international waters. It's also safer. What about me? You stay on the ship. If you're not used to it, you can get off at the next port of call. I don't care. Just then, Chen Zhao was brought to a laboratory. Chen Zhao saw a 4-square-meter glass container with a huge octopus inside. The octopus weighed at least 2 tons. Its limbs and tentacles were almost all stuck to the glass. However, because the space was small, it wriggled rather slowly. Is this the result of your research? Adele asked. No, it's just an accident. Homesius shook his head. Homesius looked at Chen Zhao. You saw it too, right? Yeah, does it eat people? Huh. What do you think? Homesius sneered at Chen Zhao. You have one last chance. Tell me your goal, or you can go in and accompany it. To be honest, don't you feel like this is a scene from a monster movie? Enclosed space, monsters, and scientists. Chen Zhao looked at the octopus in the glass container. By the way, is it a genetically modified animal? Homesius's face darkened. You really don't want to tell me? I'll ask you one last time. Are you going to tell me or not? I wonder how it tastes. Chen Zhao could feel spiritual qi from the octopus, but it wasn't huge. Theoretically, the more spiritual qi, the better the taste. Are you thinking about how to eat it? Maybe it's thinking the same thing now. Homesius looked at Chen Zhao with a half-smile. There's a saying in China, birds of a feather flock together. So you're destined to meet together. I hope you can discuss life. Homesius sneered. Send him in. Chen Zhao was dragged to the glass container. One of them pressed the switch. The container opened, and the two wanted to push Chen Zhao in quickly. But they didn't know that when they pushed Chen Zhao, he grabbed their clothes. The two fell before the container at the same time. At this moment, a wet tentacle stretched out from the container. Oh no, close it! Homesius yelled. But then the closed part of the container was blocked by the tentacle. The giant octopus took this opportunity to crawl out. Oh no! Homesius and Adele's expressions changed drastically. Leave this lab. Homesius pulled Adele out of the lab. He quickly pressed a few passwords at the door, and the lab was immediately closed. Homesius let out a long sigh. Luckily, he didn't let this big guy escape. Otherwise, he would be in big trouble. This big guy could strangle a cow to death with one tentacle. It also had extremely powerful regenerative abilities and shocking defense. If it escaped, it would definitely start a massacre. Chapter 2430. Just then, a researcher ran over in a hurry. Mr. Homesius, the boss is here. The boss is here? Homesius frowned. Yes, on the deck. How many people did he bring? Just him. Why didn't he come in? Homesius took a deep breath. Let's go see him. When Homesius left with Adele, they didn't notice that the French window of the closed laboratory behind them made a cracking sound, and a clear spider web crack spread. Homesius and Adele came to the deck and saw a slender man in a suit with his back facing them. Mr. Vincent, Homesius greeted. Vincent turned around with a faint smile on his face, as usual. Hello, Adele. I didn't expect you to be here. How long has it been since we last met? Vincent greeted Adele first. Hello, Mr. Vincent. Adele had only met Vincent once, so she only responded politely. Vincent's gaze fell on Homesius again. Homesius. Yes, Mr. Vincent. What can I do for you? No, Vincent said faintly. I'm here to inform you that my boss intends to close the laboratory. Mr. Vincent, the laboratory has been moved to the cruise ship. There shouldn't be any safety problems, right? It's not a safety issue, but your research progress hasn't satisfied my boss. But at least we've achieved some results, Homesius argued. So this time I'm here to get the information. After I get the information, our cooperation will end. Mr. Vincent, you're breaching the contract. Homesius's expression immediately turned cold. Yes, since I breached the contract first, I've decided to compensate you. What compensation? Money? Homesius sneered. No, it's a chance for you and your wife to live, Vincent said. What I want is only the research information that belongs to my boss. After I get it, we have nothing to do with each other. If you want to continue experimenting, I won't stop you. What if I refuse? Homesius asked. My boss won't let you go, including your wife and your men. I want to see how your boss will not let us go. All right, since our negotiation has failed, we'll take our leave here. I'll pass on your attitude to my boss. Vincent was not angry at Homesius' tough attitude. He kept smiling, but at that moment, Adele pulled out a gun and pointed it at Vincent's head. Adele, what are you going to do? Vincent's calm tone carried a hint of surprise. I can't tip you off. Do you think that if you kill me, the boss won't know your attitude? At least he won't find out so early, right? How bang! Vincent's laughter stopped abruptly and he fell on his back. Homesius didn't expect Adele to shoot so decisively. Leaving him alive is also a disaster. Adele said lightly, since we've already fallen out, there's no need to worry so much. But at this moment, something strange happened. Vincent, who was supposed to be dead, moved. Immediately after, Vincent twisted his limbs and propped himself up to stand up. Homesius and Adele's expressions changed. When had they ever seen such a strange thing? At this moment, there was a bloody hole between Vincent's eyebrows. But at this moment, a bullet was pushed out of the hole between Vincent's eyebrows. Then, the bloody hole began to slowly heal. What a surprise! Vincent twisted his neck. Adele, so you have this side to you. How? How is this possible? Adele's face was full of disbelief. Adele, your actions make me very angry, so I decided not to inform the boss. I'll personally reap your lives. Although Vincent said he was angry, there was no sign of anger on his face. He still spoke in such a gentle tone. Homesius pulled Adele back. He felt a dangerous aura from Vincent. This feeling, it was like looking at the giant octopus in the laboratory. Homesius waved his hand, and the guards standing on the upper deck all pointed their guns at Vincent. They were in an illegal laboratory, and sometimes they had to deal with some out-of-control test subjects. Therefore, Homesius also hired a lot of gunmen to deal with some problems that the researchers couldn't handle. Although these people were spending Vincent's money, they were hired by Homesius. So, of course, they were under Homesius' orders. What the hell are you? Homesius stared at Vincent. Thing? Your choice of words is too rude. Vincent was still so gentle. But at this moment, Homesius realized that Vincent's hands had sharp fingernails. Shoot! Homesius ordered. In an instant, all the gunmen fired at Vincent at the same time. Countless bullets landed on Vincent's body. The suit on his body was riddled with holes, and at the same time it was dripping with blood. However, this time Vincent did not fall but swayed. Bullets were expelled from his body one by one. Even the bullet hole in his head healed in a short period of time. The gunfire stopped, and everyone looked at Vincent. Everyone had an incredulous expression on their faces. Vincent, who couldn't be killed, made the atmosphere extremely strange. I forgot to tell you I have an immortal body. I don't believe you can't die. A gunman didn't believe it and threw out a grenade with a fuse. Vincent caught the grenade, and it exploded at this moment. In an instant, flesh and blood flew everywhere, and half of Vincent's body was blown to pieces. However, his lower body did not fall, and the flesh and blood that splashed out wriggled and glued together again. At this time, everyone believed his words. He really had an immortal body. Vincent's body recovered very quickly, and in less than 20 seconds, it was completely restored. However, his clothes could not be restored. At this time, everyone found that Vincent's body was covered in scars. Vincent looked at the gunman, who threw the grenade at him, and suddenly jumped towards the gunman. Da-da-da. Ah, when Vincent stood up again, his hands were dripping blood. Let's go. Homesius pulled Adele back into the cabin. The Divine Emperor of the Nine Heavens. Chapter 2431. The gunman's screams kept coming from behind. At the same time, Vincent's voice was so close. Homesius, Adele, you can't escape. Ignoring what was happening behind him, Homesius took out the walkie-talkie and said, Everyone, get your weapons and kill Vincent. But just then, a series of gunshots came from the walkie-talkie. Mr. Homesius, bad news. Deep Blue escaped. Did it what? Homesius was shocked. Wasn't Deep Blue locked in the lab? How did it escape? But Homesius only panicked for a moment. He quickly calmed down. Where's Deep Blue now? In the lower lab. Ah. Before the person on the other end could finish, he screamed. But the gunshots didn't stop. The scene was also very chaotic. Let's go to the lower lab, Homesius said. You want to lure Vincent down there? Let him fight Deep Blue to the death? That's the only thing we can do now, Homesius said. Turn right from the front and walk straight to the end. That's my office. In the third drawer under the computer desk is the portable hard drive that I used to record my research data. Help me put it away, or just destroy it. Adele and Homesius split up. When Adele ran past the previous lab, she found a huge hole in the glass research. That was where the giant octopus called Deep Blue had escaped from. There was also a bloodstain on the ground. Who knew which unlucky guy left it? Without thinking, Adele hurried to Homesius' office. But when she pushed the door open, she saw someone sitting in front of Homesius' computer. It was none other than Chun Zhao, whom she thought was dead. At the moment, Chun Zhao's legs were crossed on the computer desk. This D*Ned guy was even wearing a headset. "Hello, you're here, Adele." Adele's face darkened. She pointed the gun at Chun Zhao. "Why are you here?" Adele carefully shifted her angle and glanced at the computer screen. She'd thought that Chun Zhao was searching for some information in Homesius' computer. But when she looked closely, she almost vomited blood. This guy was actually watching cartoons. "What are you doing here?" "Haven't you noticed? I'm playing on the computer." "No, I'm asking you, why did you come here?" "I don't know the way here, so I ended up here after a few turns," Chun Zhao answered honestly. "What did you find in this computer?" "Your husband also likes to watch anime." "Hands up!" Adele scolded. Chun Zhao raised his hands cooperatively. "Can you move now?" "Yeah, just now you were going to feed me to that big octopus. I was so scared that I shivered and then I could move again." "Huh." Adele looked at Chun Zhao's playful expression. Would he be afraid? Even when he was very close to the octopus, he wasn't afraid. "How did you escape from the mouth of that giant octopus?" "Oh, it's busy eating the other two and has no time to care about me." Adele thought of the two people who should have thrown Chun Zhao to the octopus. In the end, the two of them became the octopus's food. "You're pretty lucky. Why didn't you run?" "Run? It's so chaotic outside. Where can I run?" "Stand up. Don't put your hands down. Come out slowly." Chun Zhao was very cooperative. She couldn't find any desire to resist on his face. Adele entered the computer desk. She fumbled around and found the portable hard drive. Adele looked at Chun Zhao and loaded her gun. It seemed like she was going to kill Chun Zhao on the spot. "You still have to go out, right? I'm like a scapegoat in your hands. If you run into danger, you can use me first. Don't you think so?" Adele looked at Chun Zhao's sneaky smile. She didn't think that Chun Zhao would be so kind. But Chun Zhao's plan was indeed feasible. Whether it was Vincent or Deep Blue, Chun Zhao could be used for a while. Even if he could delay them for a second, he could buy a second for himself. "Go out. Walk in front. Can you let me finish this episode?" Adele wasn't sure when she would explode and shoot Chun Zhao's head off. After a while, Chun Zhao stopped. "Go up or go down?" "Go down. Hurry up." The gunshots below were very intense. Adele was anxious. She was worried that something would happen to Homesius. After going down to the lower lab, there were more corpses along the way. Just then, Adele saw Homesius and a few researchers shooting at Deep Blue with submachine guns. "Homesius!" Adele yelled. Seeing Adele, Homesius left the researchers who were fighting with him. "Did you get it?" "Yes." "Let's go." Homesius had just taken 2 steps when he suddenly noticed Chun Zhao. "How come it's him? How come he's still alive?" "She asked the same question just now," Chun Zhao said. Homesius pointed the submachine gun at Chun Zhao. "Don't you think that, as humans, we should be on the same side? That monster is about to kill all your people." Prometheus turned around and saw that Deep Blue had indeed killed a few of his research subordinates. "It's much bigger now. It can adjust its body size through eating," Homesius said. Then he suddenly realized that he didn't need to explain anything. "Adele, let's go." "Go where?" "Go to the stern from another direction. There's a built-in lifeboat there." But just then a figure blocked Homesius and Adele's path. "Homesius, Adele, we meet again." Vincent appeared in front of the two of them, but his gaze was drawn to Indigo again. I didn't think that the flesh and blood I provided would result in such a thing. But you didn't report this to me at all. Looks like you've been disloyal for a long time. Hand it over, and I'll give you a dignified death." "Is there such a thing as dignified death?" Chen Zhao interrupted at an untimely time. "Hello, sir. You don't seem to be from here." Vincent looked at Chen Zhao with a gentle smile. He felt that Chen Zhao wasn't from here because Chen Zhao also had a smile on his face. "Yes, you can tell by looking at where their guns are pointing. It's okay. If they dare to shoot, they'll be with you soon." Chapter 2432. Chen Zhao turned back to look at Homesius and Adele. "We're all humans. Shouldn't we be united and fight against the enemy?" "Who's united with you?" Adele pointed her gun at Chen Zhao and sneered. "Looks like they don't appreciate your kindness. How about I help you get rid of them?" Vincent said, smiling. "Why don't you go kill that giant octopus first? Whoever wins can decide whether we live or die. How about that?" Chen Zhao chuckled at Vincent. "You want me to fight that octopus to the death? It's best if we die together. That way you'll have a chance to escape, right? Is my intention that obvious?" "Huh. What do you think?" Vincent's smile was cold. Suddenly, he reached out to grab Chen Zhao. "You go play with that octopus." Vincent wanted to throw Chen Zhao at Deep Blue, but he grabbed nothing. Without any warning, Chen Zhao raised a foot and kicked Vincent's waist. "You go." Vincent staggered back a few steps. Touching his waist, he stared at Chen Zhao in shock. "You!" Before Vincent could speak, a wet tentacle had already wrapped around Vincent's small foot from below. Then, with a sweep, Vincent's head swept across the metal floor. The sound was so loud that it sounded like a gong. Bang, bang, Vincent's head was bleeding from the blow. Deep Blue seemed to think that Vincent was already dead. Just like the other humans it had killed before, it casually tossed Vincent aside. However, Vincent stood up again. His face was covered in blood, and the smile on his face was gone. He looked at Chen Zhao with a dark expression, but Chen Zhao was nowhere to be seen. Just when Vincent thought that Chen Zhao had escaped, he heard Chen Zhao's voice from another direction. "Keep going. Don't stop." Vincent, Adele, and Homesius looked up and realized that Chen Zhao was already sitting on the railing on the upper floor. He was looking at Vincent with interest. Chen Zhao held an apple in his hand. No one knew where he got it from. Adele and Homesius were also very puzzled. In the blink of an eye, he was only attracted by Indigo and Vincent for a few seconds. Chen Zhao had already climbed to such a high place. Instead of running, he sat on the railing and watched the show. Vincent was so furious that he didn't care about Indigo, who had just beaten him up. He leaped up and grabbed at Chen Zhao. However, before he could catch Chen Zhao threw the apple in his hand. Ah! Vincent was hit in the face and fell from the sky. Deep Blue stretched out her tentacles again, grabbed Vincent on the ground, and beat the mole a few more times. It directly knocked Vincent into a daze. And Indigo's intelligence was very high. In fact, the intelligence of an ordinary octopus was already very high. Deep Blue's size meant that its brain capacity was even larger than that of an ordinary octopus. The first time Vincent didn't die, so this time it used more force. It wasn't until Vincent's body was smashed that he threw it out. However, Vincent stood up again. "Yo, so powerful. He's not dead yet. Is this guy a cockroach?" Chen Zhao's voice wasn't loud, but everyone heard him clearly. Vincent was no longer calm. There was only uncontrollable rage on his face. Right now, he wanted to kill Chen Zhao the most. His second was Indigo, who had made him so miserable. "Let's go," Homesius said in a low voice. Coincidentally, that guy attracted Vincent and Indigo's attention. Adele also retreated quietly, moving as slowly as possible. However, Vincent only glanced at them from the corner of his eyes and already knew their intentions. No one can escape. Suddenly, the scars on Vincent's body started leaving his body. The scene was very strange. If one didn't see it with their own eyes, it would be hard to understand. In fact, those who saw it with their own eyes would be even more confused. The scars were like poisonous snakes. They weren't like snakes. They were snakes, sea snakes. These sea snakes burrowed into every corner and covered the entire ship. Screams rang out one after another. It was as if there were countless sea snakes hidden on Vincent's body. He kept shaking them off. Chen Zhao reached out and caught a sea snake. "Thank you for your gift." Chen Zhao waved his hand while holding the sea snake. Adele and Homesius, on the other hand, were forced to lean against a corner by a few sea snakes. Vincent looked at the two and said coldly, "I've lost my patience." Hand over the research data. Suddenly, Indigo's tentacles swept horizontally. However, Vincent wasn't sent flying this time. Indigo grabbed Indigo's tentacle with one hand. Low-level bastard. Vincent glanced at Indigo and suddenly swung his arm. Indigo's huge body was smashed more than 10 meters away. However, Indigo's defense was rather shocking. Vincent's strength was very strong, but it wasn't enough to kill Indigo. Vincent stared at Indigo, his eyes releasing red light. "As a superior, I order you to submit to me." Indigo seemed to be afraid of Vincent. At least, it was afraid of the current Vincent. "Very good. Seems like you're smart enough." Vincent looked at Indigo coldly. "Now kill that guy." Vincent pointed at Chen Zhao. Chen Zhao's smile suddenly froze. Weren't we having fun just now? I thought we were friends." "Lowly human, you don't have the right to be my friend." Indigo looked at Chen Zhao, but it didn't listen to Vincent's order to attack Chen Zhao. Instead, it looked at Chen Zhao with fear. Clearly, he'd had a bad experience with Chen Zhao before. "Little octopus, do you want to be barbecued?" Indigo wriggled, as if trying to escape. "Indigo, what's going on?" "It looks more timid than I thought," Adele said. "Timid?" Homesius said. "It killed more than 10 people, but they still couldn't understand why Indigo was afraid when facing Chen Zhao." "Idiot, don't you understand my order? Go up and kill him. Kill that man." Chen Zhao jumped down from the railing upstairs and stepped on Indigo's head. Indigo didn't react at all. It had no intention of slapping Chen Zhao down. "Looks like your words don't work." Vincent clearly felt it too. His pressure on Indigo couldn't compare to Indigo's fear of that man. He didn't know what Chen Zhao had done to Indigo, but it was clear that Indigo was afraid of him. Vincent squinted at Chen Zhao. "Looks like you're not a normal person. You're a spiritualist?" "Spiritualist?" Adele and Homesius clearly didn't know what a spiritualist was. The first thing that came to mind was the kind of ghost catcher you see in the movies. Chapter 2433. What about you? You're clearly not a human. Are you a demon? Chen Zhao wasn't sure of Vincent's identity. He had a faint demonic aura on him. This made Chen Zhao suspect that Vincent was a hybrid. But some of his characteristics were different from humans. For example, his self-healing ability. Such a powerful self-healing ability made Chen Zhao very suspicious. No matter how much a hybrid's power was developed, it would be difficult for him to have Vincent's terrifying self-healing ability. For example, if Chen Zhao's body was penetrated, he could heal himself. But if his organs and head were damaged, he definitely wouldn't be able to heal himself like Vincent. Of course, other than that, Vincent had nothing else he was proud of. To ordinary people, his power was indeed very strong. But in the supernatural organization, any member should be stronger than him. Why doesn't Deep Blue attack him? As Deep Blue's creator, Homesius knew very well how savage it was. To it, all creatures that entered its field of vision were its food, and they would all become its food. But it had no intention of attacking Chen Zhao at all. Even when Chen Zhao stepped on its head, it lay on the ground obediently. Just then, the sea snakes that had separated from Vincent crawled back from all corners. They covered the entire cabin, so dense that it made one's scalp go numb. Vincent waved his arm gently. Instantly, all the sea snakes lunged at Chen Zhao. Chen Zhao didn't dodge. He just let the snakes bite him, but they couldn't break through his defense. However, their teeth could pierce through Chen Zhao's clothes. This caused them to all hang on Chen Zhao's body. They were so densely packed that it looked rather strange. This isn't fun at all. Chen Zhao shook his head. Vincent was very surprised to see that his sea snake couldn't even pose a slight threat to Chen Zhao. Any one of these sea snakes could poison dozens of people to death, but so many of them couldn't do any damage to Chen Zhao at all. Chen Zhao's body shook and all the sea snakes were shattered. Adele and Homesius widened their eyes and stared at Chen Zhao in astonishment. "How did you catch him before?" Homesius asked in shock. Adele's face darkened. "He's never really been caught by me. He's been playing with me." Adele wasn't an idiot. She thought back to Chen Zhao's previous abnormalities and figured it out. From start to finish, Chen Zhao didn't show any fear. It was because he had never really been controlled by Adele. Naturally, he had no reason to be afraid of her. Vincent's expression became solemn. He also realized that Chen Zhao was very strong. No, it should be said that he was terrifyingly strong. "Human, you have indeed exceeded my expectations. However, you cannot kill me, as long as you exhaust all your strength." "Really?" Chen Zhao didn't believe in immortality. In the past, Chen Zhao had encountered many enemies with powerful self-healing abilities, but in the end, they still died under his iron fist. Chen Zhao punched out furiously. No one saw Chen Zhao's punch. There was only a shadow of a fist that arrived in an instant. In an instant, Vincent's body shattered. "I'd like to see if you can still revive after your body is shattered." As soon as Chen Zhao finished speaking, he saw the completely shattered flesh and blood reassemble. Chen Zhao opened his mouth in disbelief. He didn't die. Adele and Homesius were also shocked. They were shocked by Chen Zhao's strength and Vincent's almost limitless revival ability. Chen Zhao didn't believe that there was really immortality in this world. He thought that Vincent's so-called immortality was because his core was in his body. As long as he destroyed the core, he could really kill him. But just now, he'd blasted him into pieces. He could actually revive. Chen Zhao couldn't help but wonder if he really had an immortality. In a dozen seconds, Vincent recovered again. Surprised, right? Vincent looked at Chen Zhao proudly. Chen Zhao frowned. This time he raised his right arm. Holy light cannon. Boom! In an instant, the white light pierced through 100 meters. It even blasted a huge hole in the body of the cruise ship. Adele and Homesius' scalps were about to explode. Who was this guy? Or rather, was he really human? He should be able to kill him this time, right? Chen Zhao looked at the empty space. Just then, a cloud of dust blew over and a cyclone formed in the empty space. Vincent, who should have been blasted into pieces, appeared before Chen Zhao again, unharmed. Vincent's anger was gone. This time he smiled proudly again. "I told you, you can't kill me." Chen Zhao raised his right arm again. Instantly, a terrifying electric arc exploded from his right arm. There wasn't just one electric arc, but hundreds of them. Each arc had 1,000,000 volts. In Adele and Homesius' eyes, it was as if Chen Zhao was waving countless lightning whips. A bolt of lightning instantly turned Vincent into charcoal. But this didn't mean the end. Chen Zhao was still releasing the terrifying power of lightning. Chen Zhao didn't just want to turn him into ashes. He wanted to make sure that not even a piece of Vincent was left. The terrifying electric current rampaged, whipping Vincent's charcoal-like body over and over again. Then his body started turning into ashes. In the end, he completely vaporized. This was a true evaporation of the human world. After confirming that Vincent's body had completely vaporized, Chen Zhao finally stopped releasing lightning. The metal floor had already melted into a huge hole. There was still uncooled metal liquid at the edge of the hole. Adele and Homesius didn't want to run anymore. They couldn't. With this inhuman person here, they couldn't run anywhere. However, not long after, Vincent appeared in front of Chen Zhao and scathed. "Ha! Your power is indeed beyond my expectations, but you still can't kill me." Black water suddenly spread under Chen Zhao's feet. The dark magma swallowed Vincent directly. However, the dark magma couldn't swallow Vincent. Vincent's power was different from the dark magma. It didn't have dark or negative attributes. So not long after, Vincent broke free from the dark magma. More accurately, Chen Zhao let him out. Vincent's personal power was actually very weak. If Chen Zhao wanted to, he could use any method to suppress him for the rest of his life. But Chen Zhao didn't care. He would have to deal with an enemy for the rest of his life. Chen Zhao felt that he would go crazy. So, Chen Zhao felt that he had to kill him here. Chapter 2434. Vincent didn't attack first either. From Chen Zhao's previous attacks, he knew that Chen Zhao was far more powerful than him. So before Chen Zhao's magic was used up, all his attacks would just be humiliating himself. Chen Zhao studied Vincent and suddenly thought of a possibility. Chen Zhao's domain suddenly expanded. Instantly, a smile appeared on Chen Zhao's face. Vincent frowned. He didn't understand why Chen Zhao was smiling, but that smile gave him a bad feeling. Are you really your real body? Or rather, do you really have a physical body? Chen Zhao suddenly asked a strange question. Vincent frowned. Of course I'm real. Is there a problem? Really? Then what about the sea snake hiding at the bottom of the ship? What's your relationship with it? Vincent's expression changed, and he suddenly charged at Chen Zhao. However, Chen Zhao lifted his foot and kicked Vincent away. Seems like my guess is right. You're not your real body, and you're not a real life form either. Chen Zhao had used different elemental attacks in the previous few attacks, but Vincent could recover every time. In the last time, Chen Zhao had even vaporized him with a terrifying electric current, but he could always recover. That was why Chen Zhao was suspicious. What made Chen Zhao think this was because he'd seen the metal dragon, Udal Loken. Udal Loken was still so calm when facing Zhang Tianyi and Bifla, who had overwhelming power. Even when he'd been completely melted by Bifla, he hadn't forgotten to tease Zhang Tianyi. How similar was Udal Loken at that time to Vincent at this moment? This made Chen Zhao's thoughts connect. Maybe the Vincent standing before him wasn't his real body at all. After Chen Zhao completely enveloped the cruise ship and the nearby sea, he discovered that at the bottom of the cruise ship, right below where Vincent was standing, there was a huge sea snake wandering around. Chen Zhao finally confirmed that the sea snake was Vincent's real body. As expected, when Chen Zhao revealed Vincent's real body, the sea snake immediately wanted to escape. But then, the sea snake realized that the water had bound him. It even pulled him out from the bottom of the ship. The sea snake kept resisting. However, he was unable to break free from the restraints of the seawater. The seawater lifted him out of the water and then stuffed him into the hole that Chen Zhao had blasted open. The originally insufferably arrogant Vincent seemed to have melted. Big Del and Homesius were shocked to see a giant sea snake suddenly burrowing in from outside. The sea serpent was too huge. They even wondered if this thing was considered a sea snake. It was a giant sea snake that was more than 30 meters long and had a body diameter of nearly 5 meters. No, it should be called a sea monster. Even though Deep Blue was at least 6 to 7 meters tall when fully extended, Deep Blue was still able to reach a height of 7 meters. But in front of him, he was just a little loach. A smile appeared on Chen Zhao's face, but the sea serpent was not so happy. It frantically ran away, trying to escape from Chen Zhao and the cruise ship. However, it was impossible to escape from the ship. Therefore, he could only find a place to hide. What Chen Zhao didn't expect was that the giant sea snake could change colors. It could even perfectly blend into its hiding spot. I love playing hide and seek. Are you done hiding? I'm going to start looking soon. Actually, there was no need to look, because no matter how it hid, it was still within the range of Chen Zhao's small world. All of its actions were just to deceive itself. Chen Zhao lifted a finger and pointed at a warehouse. The warehouse was a few cabins away from Chen Zhao, but suddenly, an electric arc shot out from Chen Zhao's finger. It pierced through the cabins directly. With a loud, strange cry, the sea snake frantically ran out. The camouflage on its body flickered in and out. It was very unstable. Hurry up and hide. The second round is starting. Boom! The sea snake was forced out by Chen Zhao again. Adele and Homesius finally saw it. Chen Zhao was playing with the sea snake. Or rather, he was torturing it. At this moment, it vividly displayed the saying that fists were the strongest. Soon, Chen Zhao was tired of playing. The dark magma spread over and dragged the sea snake before Chen Zhao. Tell me, what ability is that? Just then, the Vincent that the sea snake had transformed into appeared again. Mirage, Vincent said. Illusion. Chen Zhao asked in surprise. It's fake, but it's not completely fake. I can use any material to build a body that's like flesh and blood, even if it's just air. Chen Zhao was surprised by this answer. It wasn't because the sea snake's ability was special. It was because Chen Zhao didn't expect it to answer his question so easily. Then what's your background? What's your goal? I'm working for my master. Then tell me about your master, Roland said with a smile. Vincent glanced at Chen Zhao. He's a demon, a pure and powerful one. And then, are you going to tell me not to seek death and that your master won't let me go? I didn't say that. Also, my master told me that if I'm subdued, I should tell them everything I know. The person who can subdue me is definitely much stronger than me. All my resistance is futile. Your master is very wise. Chen Zhao looked at Vincent and then at the sea snake. Then tell me, don't hide anything. I don't know my master's name. To the outside, I always call him boss. Privately, I call him boss. I'm not interested in how you guys interact. My master is already very old. He's almost at the end of his life, but he doesn't want to die just like that. So he wants to use human technology to prolong his life. Human technology? Chen Zhao couldn't help but glance at Homesius. Yes, through human technology, Vincent said. It's indeed done, but the effects aren't as expected. Chen Zhao suddenly thought of the information he'd gotten from Isaac when he'd communicated with him. Those mutated octopuses were created from your master's cells? He used his own cells to create those mutated octopuses. Then, after they absorb enough life force, they return to your master and give the life they absorbed back to your master, right? Homesius was astonished. In fact, he didn't even know what the purpose of his research was before this. Only when Chen Zhao pointed it out did he understand his investor's intentions. You know more than I thought. Chapter 2435. I can't help it, Chen Zhao said helplessly. I'm responsible for all the trouble you've caused. At the same time, Chen Zhao's gaze landed on Homesius. Homesius' heart skipped a beat. Only then did Adele understand the cause and effect of everything. Her biggest mistake was bringing Chen Zhao to her husband. If I asked you to take me to your master, would you? I can't find him. Every time master wants to see me, he summons me directly. I don't know his exact location. Fine. Chen Zhao was a bit disappointed. Although you're very cooperative, I still have to kill you. Vincent sighed. Please don't give me too much pain. Chen Zhao was surprised. Would he accept death so calmly? Chen Zhao raised his right arm and was about to attack. Suddenly, the sea serpent's body twisted. Fuck! I got tricked. Chen Zhao charged forward, trying to catch the sea snake. But when he stretched out his hand, he grabbed nothing but air. The The great sea serpent's body had already faded away. He was summoned away. Qin Zhao rubbed his forehead. He'd actually been tricked. It turned out that the great sea serpent was trying to stall for time, since the culprit had escaped. Qin Zhao could only vent his anger on Homesius and Adele. You too, if I kill you now, you won't have any complaints, right? Adele looked at Homesius nervously. Homesius was calmer. It was impossible for them to win, not to mention risking their lives against Qin Zhao. Even Deep Blue, the octopus behind Qin Zhao, this would allow them to return to the most basic form of carbonization. Hormetheus's thoughts spun quickly. Finally, Hormetheus thought of an idea. How can you let us go? That's impossible. You're also the main culprit, and your wife isn't a good person either. That's why you have to die, unless you can be summoned away, like that sea serpent. Is it really impossible? Why don't you pay for your lives? $100 million, and I'll pretend this never happened. Hometheus rolled his eyes. If he had $100 million, he wouldn't need to use it for research. I don't have money, but I have a way to solve this mutant octopus incident. What is it? I was the one who created the mutated octopus. Of course, I have a way to deal with them, Homesius said. And I have a way to help you find the culprit behind this. Oh, Qin Zhao raised an eyebrow, although Homesius might have said that just to stall for time. However, his suggestion caught Qin Zhao's interest. Tell me, how are you going to deal with those mutant octopuses? You guys should have released quite a number of them, right? About 1 billion octopus eggs, Homesius said. Qin Zhao snorted. 1 billion octopus eggs were quite a lot. Of course, out of 1 billion octopus eggs, less than 1 in 1,000 would survive and grow up. The mutant octopus has a backtracking characteristic. As long as we use this characteristic to create a kind of signal device and change the mutant octopus's backtracking location, it will work. You're an expert in marine biology and marine mollusks. Do you know how to make electronic equipment? I'm not the one who makes the equipment. I only provide ideas and solutions. It's not difficult. Homesius paused. I've done experiments in the lab before. The mutant octopuses are very sensitive to infrasound of a specific frequency. As long as there's a device that can release powerful infrasound enough, we can summon all the mutant octopuses back. Qin Zhao had to admit that Homesius's method was indeed feasible. At least it was reasonable. Even an outsider like Qin Zhao felt that it was a good idea. Aren't you afraid that I'll burn the bridge after I know the method? Although I've told you the method, only I know the frequency of the infrasound. You might be able to find a suitable frequency through repeated attempts, but it would be a waste of time. I've heard that several coastal cities on the west coast have sealed off their coastlines. Every day they seal off their coastlines is a huge loss to the major coastal cities. Can you determine how long it will take to find a suitable infrasound frequency? My method can be implemented in 3 days at most, Homesius said confidently. Then I can also kill you after you solve the problem. I can help you find Vincent and his master, Homesius said. It's nothing more than using the octopuses to backtrack. Sir, Vincent's master isn't an idiot. He definitely knows the mutant octopuses better than me. Maybe he also knows how to use infrasound to set up an infrasound device in one or a few places and then summon the mutant octopuses back. If you set up a tracking device on one or a few mutant octopuses, you might not find anything in the end. Then what method do you have? Sir, you haven't agreed to my request. Qin Zhao rubbed his chin. After thinking for a while, he said, You've caused quite a lot of trouble this time. I won't be happy if I let you go like this. This yacht will be our compensation. Is that okay? Homesius asked. Is this yacht under your name? No. Then how are you going to compensate me? This yacht isn't under anyone's name, at least not nominally. If you have the means, you can find a shipbuilding company to register it, and then transfer the yacht to your own name under the guise of purchasing it. How do you know so much? Have you worked in this industry before? Homesius shook his head. Because I want to do that too, so I found a professional to understand it. I just haven't had the time to do it yet. To be honest, Qin Zhao was tempted by Homesius' suggestion. After all, this yacht was very expensive. The battle just now had caused some damage to the hull, but it wasn't a big deal. He could spend 10 to 20 million to fix it up. If he erased some of the traces here, it would be a real, luxurious yacht. In principle, I agree to your conditions, but I can't give you any guarantees. If you want me to sign a contract or swear, I can satisfy you. But neither contract nor oath has any binding force on me. As long as you agree, Homesius said calmly. It seemed like he trusted Qin Zhao completely. Of course, he wasn't that naive. Actually, this kind of mutual compromise had some reservations. Perhaps Qin Zhao hadn't completely given up on killing them, and Homesius might not solve the problem honestly. Perhaps he had left behind other backup plans. Chapter 2436. Of course, Qin Zhao wouldn't let Homesius and Adele go directly. First, he had to get someone to take over the ship. West, I'll give you my current location. Send someone over. Remember to bring Giselle and Jolig. Qin Zhao called West. Bring more people. There's a lot of work here. Bring Henry and the others too. Henry and his thugs were official members of the supernatural organization now. Like Klaus's lightning team, they were all normal people, but they'd come into contact with the supernatural world. Plus, they respected Qin Zhao. Now, they saw themselves as members of the supernatural organization. Of course, not all of them stayed in the organization. Half of them were in Los Angeles and relied on the organization's funds to open convenience stores, restaurants, or other businesses, other than creating additional income for the supernatural organization. They also provided limited intelligence to the organization. They couldn't say anything about the supernatural organization's existence or relationship with the organization. Also, they couldn't become street thugs anymore. Because of his awakening, Henry continued to stay in the organization. He was the organization's internal affairs manager. He was mainly in charge of the remaining half and some internal affairs. Occasionally, they'd go and help with some normal supernatural events. For example, this ship needed to be cleaned and cleaned. Clearly, they couldn't find a regular cleaning company. They could only find their own people. A while later, West arrived with a large group of people. Not just Henry and his men, but also Pamela and her evil spirit army. West walked up to Qin Zhao. President, what's going on here? They're the main culprits of the mutant octopus incident, Qin Zhao said, pointing at Homesius. Qin Zhao roughly told him what had happened. West now understood why Qin Zhao had asked Giselle and Jolig to come. They were both good with machines, especially Giselle. She could control them. Oh, remember to arrange a luxurious suite for them, Qin Zhao said. West knew what Qin Zhao meant. The so-called luxurious suite was actually the organization's dungeon. The dungeon in the headquarters wasn't creepy, but it wasn't luxurious either. However, all the prisoners were spiritualists. 2 days later, West reported to Qin Zhao that the mutant octopus incident had basically calmed down. First of all, Prometheus had stopped releasing mutated octopus eggs, solving the root of the problem. Secondly, the vast majority of the mutant octopuses had already been recalled through the so-called infrasonic wave device. At the same time, the mutant octopuses had been fished out and then incinerated. Qin Zhao also heaved a sigh of relief. After all, the mutant octopus incident wasn't just a single city's problem anymore. Even the Environmental Protection Department was involved in the investigation. The environmentalists felt that it was the excessive destruction of the ecological balance by human beings that led to the retaliation of nature. This caused the security department and even the higher-ups to put pressure on the supernatural organization. Qin Zhao finally didn't have to run around so busily anymore. In fact, This was mainly because Chen Zhao basically didn't care about small matters. In fact, the supernatural organization received missions almost every day. However, these matters were all taken over by others. For example, Klaus and his lightning team were currently on a mission abroad. Of course, their mission was not an overseas mission. Instead, the person who caused the incident ran to another country after committing the crime in Los Angeles. That was why Klaus and the lightning squad gave chase. Now that he was free, Qin Zhao was extremely happy. Fei Lai also continued her work. Most of the children in the family were sent to school, except for 5-year-old Sindora and 6-year-old Myra. The other children, including 7-year-old Elijah and Binance, 8-year-old Farintia, 11-year-old Kilo, and 12-year-old Didala, were all sent to school. Only little Jerlin, little Larissa, Sindora, and Myra were left at home. The house was much quieter too. Including Chen Zhao, the remaining children weren't used to this feeling of emptiness. Thankfully, they didn't board at school. Dash and Elementary couldn't board either. They still went home at night. Chen Zhao didn't pick them up. He still let them go home by themselves for the first time. However, Chen Zhao gave each of them a bicycle. Moreover, Dash and Elementary was less than 3 kilometers away from Mirror Lake. A one-way bike ride would take less than 15 minutes. This wasn't an unacceptable distance. Moreover, if Chen Zhao drove his family car to pick them up, it would probably be even more difficult for them to blend in with the other students. At night, the whole family arrived. However, Elijah and Binance quickly integrated into school life. They excitedly talked about their classmates and how they got along with each other. Farintia and Didala were more cheerful. They had a good time at school too. Kilo was an enhancer, but he was an extremely introverted child. He probably didn't make any new friends today. Chen Zhao wasn't in a hurry to intervene. Even the most introverted children could make friends in school. As the saying went, birds of a feather flocked together. In a school, there would always be a few introverted and introverted children. Then they would be attracted to each other. Perhaps they would be lifelong friends. Chen Zhao vaguely remembered that he wasn't that sociable in elementary school either. However, he could always make friends. After dinner, the children continued to play and fool around as usual. Chen Zhao sat on the wooden rack in the front yard and fished. Just then, the housekeeper spoke. "Master, there's a guest." The housekeeper system could identify the identity of the visitor by scanning the license plate. Since it didn't say who the visitor was, the license plate probably wasn't in the housekeeper system's database. Chen Zhao put down the fishing rod and stood up to walk to the door. A black SUV was parked outside the door. Seeing Chen Zhao, the person in the car immediately got out. Chen Zhao saw that it was Yanghua and his 2 senior brothers, Dao Er and Dao San. "Hello, Mr. Chen." Dao Er and Dao San were quite proactive. As for Yanghua, he was a bit awkward. "Hello, fellow cultivators. How have you been in Los Angeles?" "It's pretty good. We even went to Hollywood. Also, we met a production team looking for an extra. We went in and asked for one," Dao Er said straightforwardly. "Let's go in and sit." "No thanks," Dao Er said. "Your house is really beautiful and has good feng shui. If we go in, it'll probably be corrupted by capitalism." God King of the 9 Heavens. Chapter 2437. Dao Er and Dao Sin clearly weren't here to get to know Chen Zhao. There was no need for them to make friends with Chen Zhao. After all, in terms of seniority, they were all 1 generation lower than Chen Zhao. In this era, few people cared about seniority, but there were still people who cared about seniority. They weren't here as guests. They were here to accompany Yanghua. So, the person in charge this time should be Yanghua. "Hi, Yang." "Chen Zhao, I have something to ask you." "Are you asking me? Or are you asking me?" "Yes." Yanghua took a deep breath and said slowly, "I want to know the real situation in Bermuda." "I've never been to Bermuda. How would I know?" Chen Zhao asked. "Let me put it another way. If the psionic team attacks Bermuda, what are their chances of winning?" 1%, Chen Zhao said. Even if Chen Zhao was telling the truth, Yang and the psionic team might not believe him. They were enemies now, so they wouldn't believe anything Chen Zhao said. Junior, listen to me and go back. If you stay, you'll die, Dao Er advised. But Yang didn't back down. He stared at Chen Zhao, who was leaning against the door frame with a smile on his face. He knew why Yang was here this time. Actually, he wanted to get some information about Bermuda. Unfortunately, he was wrong. He didn't have any information about Bermuda at all. Even if he did, he wouldn't tell him in detail. Of course, it would be a good result if he could coax Yang away. But seeing Yang's stubbornness, he probably wouldn't give up no matter what he said. Since you don't know the situation in Bermuda, how can you be so sure that we'll lose? With your attitude, I'd throw you into the lake and drown you if you were someone else. Luckily, you have a good background and people protecting you. Chen Zhao glanced at Yang. Anyway, I've already said it. Your life and death have nothing to do with me. Chen Zhao glanced at Dao Er and Dao San. You too, when you return, send my regards to old Zhang. As for him, I don't think you should care about his life or death. If he wants to die, then let him. Dao Er and Dao San really wanted to wash their hands of this. However, they had watched Yang grow up. Although he was their junior brother, he was actually around the same age as their sons and grandsons. How could he really watch him die? Chen Zhao and Yang were neither relatives nor friends, and they had old grudges. Naturally, his words were vicious and merciless, but the two of them couldn't bring themselves to say that they should just let it go. With Yang's stubborn temper, if they said that if he didn't listen, they would expel him from the sect. Yang might really leave with the crime of betraying the sect. Even Zhang Tianyi didn't dare to provoke Yang like this, so they naturally didn't dare to. But Chen Zhao didn't have such concerns. Yang's expression naturally did not look too good. But I say, if you want to die, just die. Don't drag your wife to die with you. Bermuda is really a dangerous place. Chen Zhao had only met Akrabumon once, but he had a good impression of her, at least apart from Yang. Chen Zhao had a good relationship with the people from Dragon Tiger Mountain. Yang was angry and annoyed, but Chen Zhao's words left a knot in his heart. There was no doubt that Bermuda was dangerous. Was he really going to let his wife take the risk with him? Although Akrabumon wasn't a member of the psionic team. But this time he was going to conquer Bermuda, and his wife wanted to go with him. Yang understood that Akrabumon was worried about him. Yang did not intend to let Akrabumon take the risk. But Akrabumon was adamant. No matter how Yang tried to persuade her, he couldn't get her to give up on this idea. Then, because Toddy Belster had shown her strength, it was only a matter of time. This made him feel that he had a good chance of success in this expedition to Bermuda. That was why he agreed to Akrabumon's request. He thought about how powerful the psionic ability team was. He also had Toddy Belster as a strong support. The expedition to Bermuda this time should be in the bag. With the addition of Akrabumon, victory was almost within their grasp. However, when he heard Chen Zhao's words, he felt a chill run down his spine. This made him hesitate again. Bumon is already an adult dragon. She can protect herself. I've been a dragon slayer before. Every dragon I killed was an adult. None of them were young. Do you think they can't protect themselves? Chen Zhao looked at Yang with a cold smile. Some abilities determine whether someone can protect themselves, not how strong they are, but how strong their opponent is. Plus, I've seen Xiao Longnu before. She's not weak, but she's not that strong either. Yang looked at Xiao Longnu coldly. Chen Zhao's words were not pleasant to hear, but Yang understood what he meant. There was something in Bermuda that was more powerful than Akrabumon, and much more powerful. Yang did not want to believe this, but there was a voice in his heart that kept telling him, "Don't let your wife take the risk with you. That would kill her." Yang left, somewhat dejected. When he came here, he was actually looking for confidence. He wanted to see Chen Zhao respond to him with other attitudes. For example, mocking him or threatening him. But Chun Zhao's attitude disappointed him. Chun Zhao's tone was calm, as if he was stating a fact. This made Yangua even more uneasy. Was there really such a terrifying thing in Bermuda? The car didn't go far. Chun Zhao was about to return to his room. Suddenly, a figure appeared before him. Dao San. Master, what are you doing? Don't you know that scaring people can scare people to death? Mr. Qin, I want to entrust you. Dao San looked at Chen Zhao helplessly, his face full of bitter smiles. Entrust me with what? Chen Zhao looked at him curiously. This shouldn't be Dao San's real body, right? Chen Zhao poked Dao San's body. Don't move. This is a spell. It's not my real body, but it has my consciousness. Fine. Chen Zhao retracted his arm, but his eyes were still filled with interest. I want you to help me bring the couple back. Chen Zhao looked at Dao San. Sorry, I can't do it. Mr. Chen, Grandmaster has already promised that as long as you can help, he'll pay any price. I'm not a kindergarten teacher who has to watch over a stubborn couple. I've already said everything I need to say, but they still want to die. I can't do anything about it. If you want to use force, I don't need to do it myself. You two are many times stronger than Yangua. Is there a need for an outsider like me to do it? 9 heavens, divine emperor.